There we go. Hello, everyone. Episode 2 of the series, ranking the top 10 peaks at all positions. Last week was the point guard list. Go check it out if you haven't. This week will be the shooting guards. I'm joined by two very special guests. One is a familiar face on the channel. One is a new face. We'll start with the familiar face, Tyler, aka Hoop Venue. How have you been? Long time no see on the channel.
I've been good, man. Thanks for having me. What was the last time I was on the channel? What was it? The top 10 shooting guards career list?
It really might be.
It definitely was.
Yeah, it might be.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
I only
it's
bring
been
you
a
up
year.
to talk about shooting guards. Apparently, yeah. That's the only reason I ever call upon you is to talk about some shooting guards.
I appreciate you having me, man. I'm excited to talk shooting guards once again.
Yeah, we go. And new face, Armon. Armon, why don't you introduce yourself and tell everyone where you're from, all of that good stuff. Not geographically, but like, you know.
Sure, I can say that too if you want. I'm in Phoenix right now, originally from LA, but I'm assuming you want my YouTube channel, all that. I'm on the Worst Take podcast. Just had Mars on for our ranking the top 20 players 5 years from now. We did that list. It's been, I think we posted that about a month ago now. So that was really fun. Happy to be here.
You're welcome. Links will be in the description as always. Before we get started on the list, what happened was I asked 25 other people to give me their top 10 shooting guard peaks of all time. Now, I left the definition of peak entirely up to them. Some people sent me 1 year peaks. Some people sent me 5 year peaks. Some people sent me 3 year peaks. Some people sent me different length peaks for different players. All entirely up to them. And then I accumulated the total score that each player received. And that was the consensus top 10. These three alongside me were obviously involved. Alongside that would be 22 other people. Before we get started into who was the honorable mentions, who came last, blah, blah, blah. What was you guys' criteria when evaluating the peaks, the shooting guard position, all of that good stuff? I'll start with you, Armand.
For me, and as far as my range that I did just a 3-year range. There were some exceptions with some players who maybe had like a gap year, injured year or something like that. But generally, I kept it to a 3-year peak. For some guys, I got to certain points on other lists where I felt like maybe that was a little too strict, but I held to it. For shooting guards and for all the players, I am mostly relative to era on a lot of these guys. The impact that you had at the time that you played. For some guys, that's going to boost their case. A lot of these guys, I don't think could translate necessarily to today's game. One guy in particular that might hurt his case. So that's generally how I grade my players.
Interesting. Tyler?
Yeah, for me, it's the same thing. I feel like I'm a broken record at this point, but everything for me comes back to on-court impact and just trying to estimate how much you influenced winning, but not in your specific situation. So I'm always trying to account for the external factors that go into boosting or bringing a player down, and really just thinking about like how translatable their skill set is if we're trying to win a championship. If we're building a realistic championship caliber roster, what does your impact look like on the court? And so I'm thinking about all of these different areas, like your scoring, your creation. But for the shooting guards, I feel like a lot of these guys are offense centric, but then you do get into the different, like how valuable is this guy's on-ball defense versus this guy's team defense and things like that. Just kind of trying to sort those differences out. And for me, it was all about single season peaks, but I do like proof of concept. So it's like, if you have one clear peak, I like to see the surrounding years, like showing that this was sustainable over a larger sample, as opposed to one blip where you just like got randomly hot from 3 for 40 games. So for me, it is a 1-year peak. It is a pinnacle of a player's career, while also considering, was this translatable over multiple runs? And especially in the playoffs, I mean, you can only get 24 games pretty much max in 1 year. So looking at multi-year playoff peaks and things like that, trying to boil it down to one singular season where I think they were at their best.
When I looked at some of these shooting guards, some of the things I looked at the most was like your scoring versatility, how much you impact the offensive side of the floor. That's what I look at mostly when I look at shooting guards. How well can you fit into a scheme? How well is your playoff scoring? How high can you impact the team around you and the offensive around you throughout the regular season and the postseason? I value regular season just a little bit more because we can get like maybe smaller samples throughout a small sample of years throughout the playoffs. For example, there's somebody on my list who had a very high like playoff scoring, true shooting, but like most of them were through one series for multiple different seasons. So I kind of like played that in, but mostly just scoring and on-court impact throughout the regular season and postseason.
And for me, it was, I mean, quite simply just how good I think you were at the game of basketball. Trying as much as possible to isolate your skill set outside of your situation, because I do think people around you, the team you're on, does impact someone's overall impact on that team. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're more or less impactful than someone else in a lesser situation or a better situation. So trying to just evaluate skill sets for what I think they are worth. Then obviously looking at in situations in which I think it was interchangeable, I did value the quote unquote longer peak. So if I think two guys are practically one and the same, but one's peak was 4 years and another one's was 2 years, I'll favor the one with the 4-year peak. Overall, I'm not falling for like box score stuff. If I think someone had a lesser box score but was more impactful, I'm going to value that player. If I think their skill set was more malleable, versatility, I think John D said that's something I did value as well. I think the shooting guard or small forward positions are definitely positions where I think versatility drives a lot of impact. Just being able to impact the game in a multitude of ways. Can you be my point guard in certain instances? Can you be my shooting guard? Can you be a wing and jump in smaller lineups, whatever the case may be? Can you provide me with two-way impact? All of those things. And yeah, ultimately, it was a tough list to make. There's always going to be guys who should have made it, but they didn't, and then you're going to tell us how we were wrong. But that's just is what it is. But ultimately, there was 26 people involved, which means our consensus is correct. But before we get into the top 10, there were 22 names I received across 26 lists. 22 names. Compare that to the point guard list, there was 19 names, so slightly more. I do feel like saying there was one more person who sent me a list this week, so the maximum score you can get is 260 points. For anyone who's unfamiliar with the scoring system, first place 10 points, second place 9 points, so on and so forth. So if you're the 10th best peak, that's 1 point. Add up all the points, that's your total. Okay, without further ado, in 20th place, we actually have a three-way tie. These guys all got 1 point. That means they were 10th on 3 people's lists. The people who had them 10th were, let me get this absolutely correct. Dream, for anyone who doesn't know, Dream was my former co-host before I replaced him with John D, who made my show exponentially worse.
He's
Riv,
lying. He has me on a $600 million contract.
overpay of doom. That's why the facilities haven't upgraded. Riv had one of these players 10th, and the other one was Chilltown. I'm actually just going to say the players, and you guys can try and assign them to the people who they fit the most. So one of them was Joe Dumars. One of them was Pete Maravich, and one of them was Devin Booker. Those were the 3 people.
So Riv had Devin Booker.
Yeah, that's what I was.
Okay.
Chill had Joe Dumars.
Okay.
And who was the third guy?
Pete Maravich and Dream.
Oh, damn. I think, yeah, Dream probably had Pete Maravich. I'm not going to lie. I thought Pirate would have had Pete. But, yeah, that'll be the 3. That'll be the 3. Wait, hold on. Let's redo that. Chill with Joe Dumars, Riv with Pete Maravich, and Dream with Devin Booker.
See, this is what happens when you give people too much time to think. He was 3 for 3, and now you're 1 for 3. So,
oh, fantastic. Okay,
yeah, shame on you. But let's start with Joe Dumars. Joe Dumars was number 10 on Chill's list. Did he receive any consideration from you guys?
He's cool. I think Joe Dumars was really good with the Pistons as their like lead scorer, really solid defender. He played well off the ball, getting downhill, and he was also a solid shooter as well. He just provided a level of offense for that Pistons team next to a Isaiah Thomas and a Bill Laimbeer who was underrated as well. So he was cool, but I didn't really consider him much. I had a pretty solid like group of 12 guys, and he didn't really reach that threshold for me.
Dumars is solid. Very good player, key part of those runs, but not somebody I greatly considered. I do think he's one of the guys that suffers from the problem with his defensive peak not aligning with his offensive peak, whereas during the time he was arguably the best defensive guard in the league, or at least best on-ball defensive guard in the league during the late 80s, his offense was still kind of growing. And then you get to the early 90s, and now his offense is kind of coming into his own. He's doing more as a playmaker, doing more as a creator. But then the defense starts to slip a little bit as those Pistons teams get worse and worse. And I just don't think there was ever an intersect of offensive and defensive value from Dumars that combined into a top 10 shooting guard peak.
Yeah, I'm in alignment there. I think that's really the reason I didn't seriously consider him, was those offensive and defensive peaks not matching at the same time. And I don't think his offensive peak was high enough to where I'm considering him over some of these other, like, I built it out to like about 15. I do think there's other guys that peak higher offensively as well. So if you're not giving me that elite defensive value, I favored those guys. But if I built it out to 20, he'd definitely be there. But
yeah, I'm looking at maybe 16 names I considered, I think, give or take a couple. Joe Dumars was not really on that list. I was pleasantly surprised when I saw Chill included him. It was nice to give him a shout out. But yeah, I like his offensive game. I do think people understate like his playmaking ability and like the ability to be a secondary ball handler, which is something I value. And I do think his offensive game, because it peaked when the Pistons were no longer competitive, I think a lot of people do sleep on what he was doing in the early mid-90s. But yeah, I am in alignment with Tyler on just the defense by that point wasn't really at the same level. And I never really bought the defense as high as some people. For example, I know Chill has called him a better defender than Tony Allen. That's something I've never been able to align on. But shout out to Joe Dumars. It's nice to give him some representation. What about Pete Maravich? Was that someone any of you guys considered?
Yeah, not really. Again, a guy that I think in a different era would be a lot better of a player, but ultimately the era that he's playing in, the 3-point shot doesn't come in until his last year of his career. That outside shooting, the volume scoring from out there, like, it's still impressive. Don't get me wrong. His game is impressive and it's pretty to watch, but it's basically the long two of that day, but even worse of a shot that he's taking from even a little further out, the majority of his shots. And that's just not the most, it's the most inefficient shot of his era. So I'm lower on that as far as his value in his era. But again, if he played in the 80s, got his volume up from the 3-point line, I think he would have been better. But yeah, overall, I'm pretty low on Maravich, I guess.
I completely agree. I think Maravich is a guy who could light up the box score and do a lot of heavy lifting on offense, but I don't know if he was ever the type of guy that was just this ultra impactful player. And it's not necessarily the fact that he played on bad teams and only played, I think, 12 or 13 career playoff games, but more so what you were talking about with him settling for, like, at that time, what was the worst shot in basketball, and him being the best in the league at that shot didn't really drive as much impact as it would in today's era, shooting it from 28 feet. While also I think, like, the passing highlights to me make people assume he was like a best playmaker in the league caliber creator, when that was more flash than actual, like, applicable value creating shots for teammates. And then of course, like, he's probably by far the worst defender that anyone considered for this list. And that matters.
Yeah, my issue with Pete, I agree. I think he came around probably 10 years too early, just in terms of the value of his shots he took. He always hovered around league average or slightly below, like relative true shooting, whatever the case may be, which I'm convinced would not be the case if he was shooting, per the eye test, the more than 6 threes a game that he was really shooting back then. At good percentages, once again, per the eye test. He really good shooter. Really good ball handler, really creative. The issue I have is, once again, per the eye test, I don't have the numbers for all of his career. He turned the ball over a lot. And when it worked, it looked great. But I don't think it drove enough, like, similar to what Tyler said, as a playmaker, to where I'm living with the turnovers, the high volume shooting, where you're not getting the 3 points for the shots you're taking. I just feel like, relative to era, for the most part, tends to benefit people. Pete Maravich, I think, is someone who the era in which he played in is kind of holding him back, which is it's unfortunate. He's a victim of relative to error. There's not many of them. He is one of them, in my opinion, and that's why he didn't make my list.
The first season we have turnovers was 1978, and he averaged 5 turnovers a game.
Okay, interesting. Yeah,
it's a lot of turnovers.
I think, it's really. I just think if he came around 10 years later, now, do I still think teams would let him shoot as many threes he was taking? Maybe, maybe not. But if they did, I think the numbers would have looked crazy. The efficiency would have looked crazy. He would have been called more ahead of his time than he already was. Would it have led to winning? I don't know. But ultimately, cultural impact is cultural impact. The most interesting one that was in someone's top 10 to me was Devin Booker. He was in Riv's number 10 spot. He was someone I considered. Did you guys consider Devin Booker?
I actually did, for like not seriously, but he was within that top 15-ish that I built out. And I was surprised somebody had him on here. One of my co-hosts, Zach, is a big Suns fan, big Devin Booker glazer, the biggest Devin Booker glazer on the planet, I thought. But having him in the top 10 peaks of all time, maybe second. But I mean, he is just very good offensively, especially during his prime, which I didn't set one for him, but I guess I would gauge as like 22 to 24, something like that. Really good overall as just a flat out scorer, good 3-point shooter, especially in 2022. But yeah, I guess I just didn't really seriously consider him. And then now I think he's tailed off from his peak, but part of that is his utilization, that the Suns have been using him as more of a point guard now, which I don't necessarily think is his strength. I don't think that's probably how he's best utilized. So I'd like to see him be utilized more as a true number 2 again. But yeah, I think just falls short offensive impact wise towards some of the other guys.
Yeah, I gave Booker some pretty decent consideration. He wasn't like on my final cut, last 1 or 2 cuts, but if I did draw it out to 15, I feel like he'd be in there. Very uniquely talented scorer. He has like a 6 or 7 year run as a top 5 transition scorer in the league, both efficiency and volume wise. And that's really impactful. Like being able to get those easy buckets, especially in the playoffs. Like I remember in that Denver series in 2023, everyone remembers the outlandish shot making. Not everyone remembers that he was averaging like 12 points a game in transition. And that was a big part of why his efficiency was what it was. But then also being one of the most dynamic off-ball wings, honestly, we've ever seen, in terms of he's going to be a screen setter. He's going to fly off of screens and be a movement shooter. He's going to make 0.5 second decisions off the catch to destroy closeouts and get to 1 or 2 dribble pull-ups. But with that also being such a dynamic on-ball creator who can run a spread pick and roll and hit corner skip passes, get to the pull-up jumper, has a little bit of a mid-post game. So if you put a small guard on him, he can beat mismatches. Really just like well-rounded offensive game that I feel like translates into any type of offensive system and brings strong impact. But for me, the hangups are, I don't really know. Like, I don't think he was a plus defender. I don't think he was a liability, but more so like an average-ish defender at his peak. And then also he really struggled getting all the way to the rim in the half court while also not being an elite pull-up 3-point shooter. So I do think his ability to like break down defenses and create those really high pressure points lags behind pretty much anyone that's going to be in my top 10.
I pretty much agree with the sentiments Tyler had. One of the more versatile scorers at the 2-guard position we've seen in a while. Like you said, with the transition scoring, the mid-post scoring. I do agree with some of the things you said. Just with him playing him at point guard was what I feel like stunted him a little bit, because I always feel as though Devin Booker was best off the ball, being able to make decisions off the catch, whether it was driving closeouts, getting to the mid-range, being able to be more of a scorer instead of a facilitator. And there was times definitely in the Suns run over the past few years where it felt like he had to worry more about setting up the offense as a facilitator than more as a scorer. And I feel like that stunted him a lot as well. But as far as the scoring, the versatility, the efficiency, the shot making, all of that definitely helped me like consider him for this list. He just didn't make it to my 10 spot.
Yeah, I considered Book relatively heavily. That stretch 22 to 24, with 23 probably being the apex, especially with that postseason run. I like that Tyler spoke about the transition stuff because that was a big deal for me, and it's one of the reasons why I'm a bit lower on Devin Booker in recent years, as he seems to be getting out in transition less and less. But that Devin Booker was one of the best transition scorers in the league, filling lanes, getting to the rim, transition threes, whatever the case may be, while being one of the best on-ball scorers in the NBA and one of the best off-ball scorers in the NBA. Just the scoring versatility with having real passing chops was something that I valued a lot. Didn't move the needle for me on defense, but didn't also like bleed value. So that was just cool, I guess, just nice net neutral. But the scoring versatility was definitely the thing that led me to considering him. The reason I couldn't have him higher was just the questions I had about his pull-up three-point shot, and it's something I've had as a question mark for him for a while, especially for someone who like looks like he can shoot so well. Just never really having the consistency as a pull-up three-point shot maker has definitely led some things to be desired for me. But reliable off the catch, one of the best mid-range scorers in the league at the time. Most of his rim frequency does come in transition, but ultimately transition is transition. Go get your buckets. Being one of the more consistent scorers in the league, and being a good playoff scorer, especially in 22 and 23. 24 is carried by that game 4 sweep. So I will not fall for that 27 points per game. But 22 and 23, being that level of postseason scorer does show a level of versatility and coverage resilience, I guess. That led me to considering him, but ultimately I just couldn't get him in my top 10. That is the 20th spot. Now on to, this will be 18th because these guys were all tied for 20. There's actually 2 people now tied in 18th. These guys had 2 points. One person, and both people had them in 9. So they were on 2 lists, both at 9. It was Fox's list and Chill's list. I'm gonna let you guys guess who was who. One of them was Sam Jones, and one of them was Mitch Richmond. If you guys want to go and guess who may have who.
I guess Chill was Sam Jones.
Interesting.
I think Chill was Mitch Richmond.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, John D just stop guessing stuff. Yeah, just stop guessing stuff.
Because I know Chill. Okay. I know Chill messes with Mitch Richmond.
Oh, you don't know Ox. That's all that means. You don't know Ox. But we'll talk about Sam Jones first. Did any of you guys consider Sam Jones for your list? I'll speak first. I did not. Personally, I did not consider him.
Nah. I also didn't. He's a very good player in a weird kind of time where it's like he was on these elite defensive Celtics teams. That was like their entire identity. And he sneaky was like far and away the best scorer on the team for that run. And one of the better scorers in the league, like an actual like efficient 25 type point per game type of guy. But that's basically all of Sam Jones's value, in my opinion. Wasn't really a creator, wasn't a defense. Like he wasn't a part of that identity. He was more so just like a bucket getter. And I do think all of the guys in this top 10 list for me, at least, are like bucket getters who then supplemented that bucket getting with other ancillary skills that I just don't think you really got with Sam Jones.
Yeah, I think, again, similar way where he's a bucket getter, doesn't do much else. And it'd be different if like those Boston offenses were like elite because of it, but they weren't. I mean, they're towards the bottom of the league at the time. So, you know, he's a nice player, but yeah, I didn't really seriously consider him either.
Too much Sam Jones hate. One of the best shooters of that era, obviously like you got Jerry or whatever, but Sam Jones, one of the best, it was all mid-range, but one of the best mid-range shooters of that time. The first person I really saw go into the bank shot as consistently as he did. So, you know, pioneer in some ways. Tim Duncan should thank him. But yeah, ultimately it was just he drove a lot of his value with his scoring. I do like the fact that you could like run those DHOs and he could come off and movement shots once again around the elbows and whatnot because they weren't shooting threes. But still there was value to that. Big shot maker as well. Ton of clutch buckets for a Celtics team that, like Armand said, was lackluster offensively. So whenever they could get that scoring punch just to push them over the edge, it was valuable. But my issues were he didn't really contribute to that defensive identity as much as some other people on that team. He kind of was just there for scoring relief. And then a lot of the other scorers that the Celtics would get in like the mid to late 60s also provided value in other ways that Sam Jones did not. So it kind of was just one-dimensional value in an era in which his value wasn't as valuable as it would be in subsequent times. So that's why I didn't really consider him. But he was a really good player. I believe he came top 5 in MVP once. Really good player, but just ultimately wasn't going to make the cut for me. And Mitch Richmond also was not going to make the cut for me, but really good shooter as well. So shout out to Mitch Richmond. Amazing shooter, really consistent scorer. The issue I have with Mitch Richmond is trying to isolate his actual peak. Because he came into the league averaging about 20. He left the league. I don't count what he did in like Washington and whatnot. He left the league averaging about 20, was a consistent scorer and shooter throughout. Good passer, could create out of his own drives and all that stuff. But ultimately he lagged behind the other high-level scorers of his time and then didn't make up for it in the other ways. Like he didn't make up for it by being an exceptional playmaker. He wasn't an exceptional shooter. He wasn't an exceptional defender. So it was kind of just he was the second-rate two guards, which is good, but probably not enough to make my top 10.
Completely agree. That was exactly my line of thinking. Just very skilled scorer, but not like a best in the league caliber scorer. And that's what's driving most of his value, kind of like what we talked about with Sam Jones. The other weird thing with Richmond is I do think there's a very clear peak, but it's when the 3-point line was shortened. And I don't like, that's one of those hard things to account for. Like similar with like Glenn Rice is another guy. It's like, what caliber of shooter are you if like you are very clearly peaking as a scorer and as a shooter when the 3-point line is shortened? I think that's hard to like, it's really hard to account for that when we're doing relative to era.
I've never really thought about it. I do that subconsciously though. Like subconsciously, I'm taxing Glenn Rice's 47% from 3, but like it's never conscious. I just know I'm taxing it.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you ain't really shoot 47%. But yeah, shout out to Mitch Richmond though. I know Ox wanted to give him his love. So shout out to him for 9th place. Well, 18th overall, but 9th place on his list. Was there anything you guys wanted to add to Mitch Richmond?
No, not particularly. I didn't seriously consider him. Yeah, I'm in agreement with you guys on him. Provides a lot of value as a scorer, but not much else. In a way, like, you know, I guess I kind of disrespected Devin Booker by saying you got to be a Glazer to have him on here. But in a way, I think Richmond is just like Booker, but just slightly worse. Doesn't provide value in other ways that Devin Booker does. So that's kind of how I view him.
Yeah, this is so on to this will be, where are we at? 17th place. This is the first person who is not sharing his spot with anyone. So congratulations to him, standing alone with 3 total points. He was on one person's list in 8th place. And this is someone who I did consider, and I didn't know what to do with him. David Thompson. He was on Pirates' list in 8th place. And I just didn't know how to evaluate David Thompson. I mean, he's like the perfect name for a peak list because it really was a peak, and then he was gone. One of the best scorers in the league at the time. High flyer, amazing athlete, finish above the rim, could get to the free throw line, elevated on the mid-range jump shot. Pretty good shooter as well. Like once again, mid-range stuff, but pretty good shooter, pretty accurate, relatively efficient. Led some pretty good offenses in Denver in his peak. The issues I had with David Thompson were, once again, and this might be a common thing for like this era, these guys didn't get to the rim as much as I thought they would when you go back and watch. Mid-range jump shots and over the top shot making, which he was viable at, but once you get into his smaller playoff sample and that rim frequency is even more dented and he's relying on that over the top shot making, he just isn't as good at it as some of the other people who drive a lot of their value from scoring. Now he was a capable passer, which is something that I did value. But ultimately there were just guys who, particularly looking at my 10 spot, just a bit more playoff resilience. Someone who I preferred their malleability a bit more offensively. But I was intrigued by David Thompson. He was on Pirates list, in case I didn't say that. Definitely one of the more interesting cases of anyone being included, but ultimately I just couldn't get him on.
Coming from somebody who hasn't watched a lot of David Thompson, what years are y'all like considering the peak of his career? Because I see like early on he finished like top 10 in MVP voting like his first 4 seasons. What year would y'all consider like the peak of his career?
Probably
It would be
like
right after the merger, I think.
I would say like 76 to 79, like that, like mid to late 90s, like when the merger is happening. Very interesting player. I feel like there's no one really quite like David Thompson, and that's what makes him kind of hard to evaluate, especially during that time where we are still having like working with limited data, limited film, and then not really many playoff runs during his peak. I do think one of the weird things with David Thompson is he was kind of a slasher. Like I feel like he's optimized in a slasher role. But I do think like he was also kind of weirdly ball dominant. That's like one takeaway I've had from watching the Nuggets. Like he wasn't driving the same sort of off ball value during that time that the other major slashers like George Gervin or Dr. J were. And I do think that's one of the limiting factors with David Thompson, because then he also isn't like a dominant playmaker. Like you said, he had some passing chops, but wasn't this like world-class creator. And then also wasn't driving defensive value. So I do think you would have liked to see more of like the constant rim pressure and the off-ball value that you see with other major slashers. And he never really quite put that all together to really be in consideration for me. But similar kind of range to where like Sam Jones and Mitch Richmond would land on my list.
Yeah, I'm in agreement, especially with where I would have Mitch Richmond, kind of similar value for me. I think if I take like I said at the start, I was very kind of strict on like this 3-year peak. If I had just done maybe 1-year peaks, I would have given him a little more consideration. But it is such a short peak. And I think, 1 or 2 of those years, particularly 78, 79 or 77, 78, really stick out. So I would have given him a little more consideration. I don't know if I still would have put him on the list if I had only considered that 1 year, but really elite as a scorer. But I was going to compare him to somebody else, but I don't want to spoil my list. So I'll leave it there for now.
Interesting. Next up, we have 15th place because these two also are tied. They have 5 points. So if anyone who hasn't kept up, in 20th place, we had 3 players with 1 point. In 18th place, we had 2 players with 2 points. In 17th place, we had 1 player with 3 points. And now we have 2 players with 5 points in 15th place. 1 player was on 1 list, which means he was in 6th place on that list. And 1 player was on 2 lists. He was in 7th on 1 list and 10th on the other. We'll start with the player that was on 2 lists. And that was Brandon Roy. Brandon Roy was on 2 lists. He was on Ron's list at 7, and he was on Penn's list at 10. What can you guys tell me about Brandon Roy?
I'll start, I guess. I gave very strong consideration to Brandon Roy because, like I said, I went for the 1-year peak, and I do think 08-09 Brandon Roy is one of the like better offensive guards historically, 2 guards historically. Incredibly skilled scorer with or without the ball, kind of like from that Devin Booker mold of just guys who are incredibly dynamic. Had so much potential. I just think we never saw the actualization of like a legit top tier offensive engine from Brandon Roy. And honestly, like it's kind of more nitpicky as to why he didn't get into my 10 spot. Like I said, he was in this group of players that was right in that group. And it's more so like, I don't really think Brandon Roy had deficiencies as it was. I just think other guys had greater superpowers than Brandon Roy. Whereas Brandon Roy, to me, was like more of like the jack of all trades on offense. Whereas the guys in my top 10, I think, have legit superpowers that you point to. And it's like, that's their game.
I like the Devin Booker comp. That's why I always liken him to. I did consider Brandon Roy. I ultimately just couldn't get him on the list. It's not really, similar to what you said. It's not really anything he didn't do. More so than there was just some guys who I valued more in terms of, once again, their playoff peaks or whatever the case may be. Some of the ceilings they hit was slightly higher. But in terms of versatility and all-around game, there weren't many holes you could poke in Brandon Roy's game. So I'm not mad at Penn. Ron, he's a Seattle guy, so I understand him having him at 7th. But yeah, I'm not mad at the inclusion of Brandon Roy. He was once again one on my short list of guys I considered. Just ultimately couldn't get him on the list. Although if I make the list another time, maybe he does make it. So wasn't too far off. I saw a couple people say that it was crazy that guys included him in the comments. But personally, I think he's a valid inclusion. But he does come in 15th place. Is there anything you guys want to say about Brandon Roy?
Brandon Roy is a hell of a watch, just like the off-ball play and the spot-up shooting, the mid-range play, the athleticism and finishing around the rim. Again, from what I value on my list, I just couldn't put him at 10. I just don't think he was as skilled of a scorer as some of the guys I have on my list. And he doesn't have that clear, like, superpower that you could use versus, like, my 10, 9, 8 spot.
Yeah, I'm glad somebody had him on here because I really do love watching Brandon Roy. I think it is, like, without injuries, highly projectable that he would have been on here for me. He's also somebody that I think my kind of 3-year rule on these peaks hurts for sure. And if I'm honest, I didn't consider him, but that's just because he slipped my mind. But truly, like, one of my favorite players to watch. We just kind of got robbed of that peak that I do think was coming down the line, barring those injuries.
He had the entire package, man, because he was also a great playmaker. He got to the line a ton. The 09 Blazers, I believe, were the #1 offense in the league, or at least like top 3. Then in the playoffs, he goes and averages like 30 in the first round. He was a talent, man. He was unbelievable.
Yeah, they were the #1 offense
player,
yeah.
But other than that, like, offensively, it was just a jack of all trades type, high level mid range scorer, could shoot the 3. I mean, yeah, there's not much that can be said that hasn't already been said. So shout out to Brandon Roy. The player he was tied with was 6th place on one person's list. Shout out to Pirate. He's in the chat. He might be demoralized that he was the only one who had him. Sidney Moncrief. He had Sidney Moncrief at 6. What are you guys' thoughts on Sidney Moncrief? I'm going to start with someone other than Tyler. I feel like Tyler starts every time, and then you guys start sneakily copying him. So, yeah, we're gonna start with. I'll start. Why not? I considered Sidney Moncrief, but I didn't consider Sidney Moncrief maybe as much as I should have considered Sidney Moncrief. I think he is one of the best, if not the best, defender that we're going to talk about here today. Looking at the names on here, probably the best. One of the 3 best defenders on here. There we go. One of the 3 best defenders on here. His man defense was exceptional. His hands, some of the best of that time. And he really could score. Like, he was someone who could put the ball in the basket, competent playmaker, someone who could play the 1 or the 2 for you. I think he actually did play the 1 or the 2 during his career. I think he did actually do both. Good mid-range scorer. Once again, didn't shoot the 3 at that time. That's fine. Different time period, whatever the case may be. But good free throw shooter, good mid-range scorer, great size for the position, about 6'4", long arms. The reason I didn't have Sidney Moncrief on the list, quite frankly, is I just think he's a step below offensively everyone I have on my list. And I don't think he makes up for that personally with his man defense. Now, part of that is I do tend to lean more towards off-ball defense than on-ball defense in terms of what I value. So part of that is me just taxing his style. Maybe if he would have been a bit more active and help around the rim, I could have had him higher. Maybe if he would have got more deflections, I could have had him higher. Maybe if he was just a bit more of a high-level volume scorer, I could have had him higher. But once again, similar to the Brandon Roy stuff, just his all-around game, there weren't things that he couldn't do at a very good level. He was a good passer. He could initiate offense. He could score in the mid-range. And once again, similar to what I said about Sam Jones, I think he came top 5 in MVP once. So like he was considered one of the better players in the league at the time, but ultimately just left a little bit too much to be desired offensively for me. But I can also concede that maybe I didn't give him as much consideration as I should have. because this was someone who did go into the playoffs and could put the ball in the basket. Now, my bigger issue with him was he did rely on the mid-range jump shot a lot. So once you do get into the postseason and you are seeing like some of these higher level teams where you're seeing a Philly or whoever the case may be, the efficiency could fluctuate in terms of how reliable that mid-range shot was. And he didn't like get to the line at the elite rates in the playoffs as much as I think he did in the in the regular season. But good scorer, good passer. He was top 5 twice. Thank you, Parrot. But really good player. I mean, spoiler alert, every player we talk about today is going to be good, but just couldn't get him on my list.
I'm glad someone had him. I really did try to get him on the list. So shout out to you, Pirate. He was actually my number 11, so he was the first name off the list for me. I just couldn't do it. But the fact that to me he is truly like one of the best guard defenders of all time, and he's giving you 20 plus points per game, good mid-range scorer. I'm really a huge fan of that. And, you know, maybe he's not the offensive number one that some of the other guys that, you know, might come above him or maybe you considered above him may be. But the fact that he is so good defensively as well, I think also adds a ton of value in team building. If I were building a team with maybe a better player, he's more portable in that way to play next to a great offensive juggernaut, and he can be your number one defender on the perimeter. That's why I really, really did consider him, and I really did want to get him on the list, but I just left him on the outside.
Also, really good offensive rebounder too. That's one thing I forgot to say. Really good offensive rebounder, which I do think does drive value.
I was going to say Moncrief's a guy who checks a lot of boxes. He was also one of my first like really tough cuts. Just in my opinion, he was the best defensive guard in NBA history. I do think he is the GOAT defensive guard. And it's like a lot of the things I do love in a player, Moncrief checked. You brought up the offensive rebounding. He was also consistently like top 3 in free throw rate. He got to the line a ton. He was constantly playing through contact, very physical offensive player, getting to the rim, getting downhill in transition. Pretty good passer. Like you said, had the mid-range game. It all comes together and it's like, man, if you are just plugging a player into a team that is going to compete for a championship, there are very few guys you point to before Moncrief and you're like, okay, they bring more value. But I do think Moncrief as the true driver of the ship on offense just is so limited in ways that the guys in my top 10 aren't. And for a guard position, I feel like, I mean, that's what drives the most value on the basketball court. It's the ability to create high-level offense. And I think Moncrief's, a lot of his offensive strengths were a function of Milwaukee in the mid-'80s stacking their roster with skilled offensive players and other even better playmakers than Moncrief. Like Pressey was at that time like a top 5 passer in the league. You have another like go-to scoring option in Terry Cummings. You have Craig Hodges to space the floor. I do think that team was very talented offensively, and that meant Moncrief didn't have to do as much heavy lifting and as much creation. And really, I never really viewed him as a true offensive engine in the way that I view a lot of other high-level shooting guards. But like I said, he checks a lot of boxes, and to me is just off the list.
GOAT guard defender is interesting.
It's between like him. I mean, yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of guys in that discussion, but I've pretty confidently had him at least like, if not number 1 on the Mount Rushmore of guard defenders.
Yeah, I'd have him top 3.
Interesting. I also just looked at it. I'm not sure. 9 free throws a game in the playoffs in 85. My fault, Sidney Moncrief, for saying it didn't translate to the playoffs as well. I apologize. Hands are up. But yeah, really good player. Shout out to Don Nelson, rest in peace, for what he was doing with those Bucks teams in the mid 80s, with guys like Marcus Johnson and, like you said, Paul Pressey and everyone else on that roster. Very ahead of their time, but never won anything, so they never get recognition. Anyway, next, 14th place. This guy, I think this is one of the first people who is on multiple lists. I know Brandon Roy was on 2 lists, but this guy had 7 points. He was on more than 2 lists, I'm fairly sure. This guy was on, let's see how many lists he was on. 1, 2, 3. Is it just 3? 4. He was on 4 lists. He had 7 total points. He was on Delsky's list at 9th. He was on Brad's list at 10, ZZ's list at 10, and Jordan's list at 8. This is a modern player, Hall of Famer. Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson comes in with 720 points. Now, was he someone that you guys considered?
I consider Klay. I'm not gonna lie, I consider Klay. I just don't think. Okay, I don't know how to put this, but he gets put in a certain category because I have the other two shooting guards in his category on my list, but I don't think he's as good offensively as those two other guys. And I also don't think his on-ball defense is as good as like people give him credit for. Like, I think he's a really solid on-ball defender. Don't get me wrong, but I've seen him in conversations where it's like, oh yeah, he's up there with like Pacers Paul George defensively or Jimmy Butler defensively, and I don't see those. I don't see that at all. Like Klay Thompson is for example, we talked about multiple point guards in last episode where it was like, yeah, he's a really consistent player to where more longevity conversations could boost him more than a peak. And I just don't think he's strung along maybe 2 to 3 years where he was as impactful as majority of my shooting guards on my list. Like I said, he gets put in a certain category with a couple other shooting guards, and I just don't think he's as good offensively as those two other guys, like at all. But that's where I was like, you know what, maybe he wouldn't make it onto my top 10.
Yeah, I feel like anytime I talk about Klay Thompson, maybe it's just the conversations I have with my co-hosts, I get painted as this Klay Thompson hater. I've really tried to not be, just because of the conversations that he gets put into. I try not to like underrate him because of that. I mean, look, one of the best shooters of all time, I think, is a plus defensively, but like you said, like it gets a little overrated, overvalued defensively. Like he's really good. Is he elite? Like he gets put in the conversation of? Not really. I don't think if you take him away from Steph Curry, is he this like offensive force that could lead an offense as his own guy? Is he a shot creator for himself? Probably not in this like in any way that these top 10 guys, or even, to be honest, I didn't have him in my top 15 peaks. So these top 15 guys could. Personally, I don't think so. I considered him ish, but not within my top 15.
Real quick, I don't think I said much good about Klay Thompson. So let me just still one of the greatest shooters of all time. Like the off-ball play is fantastic. He did have like a one dribble pull up. What my just main concern was when I'm looking at shooting guards, I'm not gonna lie, unless you're like a GOAT tier off-ball player, I'm really considering the on-ball creation. Like Klay does provide a lot of value as being an off-ball shooter, one of the greatest movement shooters of all time, being able to be have a quick release, being able to get his shot off cleanly, especially off the ball. But that's not as valuable to me versus what 9 or 8 of my 10 guys on my list were doing on a night-to-night basis, and the versatility of what they brought in. So Klay I wouldn't be upset at hearing him on this list, but for what I value in a shooting guard, I just think I value 10 other guys a little bit more.
Yeah, I completely agree. I love Klay's game. Like he's one of my favorite players from that era, just because of how unique his approach was. And I think like he's one of the most extreme examples of just having a superpower, and that's his game. And I think like his combination of movement instincts with that shooting ability to just like quick trigger, set his feet, and get like 12 threes off in a tough playoff game, and hit them at a 44% clip. It's an unbelievable skill set to have, but I do think there's a clear signal of Klay's playoff scoring really lagging behind what he was doing in the regular season, just because like he was so one-dimensional in the way these other guys aren't. Like John D brought up some of the other off-ball shooters that we're going to talk about. They all had other dimensions to complement the off-ball scoring that Klay never really had. Like Klay had a 1-2 dribble pull-up. He had nice backdoor cuts. He could occasionally get all the way to the rim on drives to counter overplays. Decent passer, but not ever like a versatile enough scorer to when like you got into these elite playoff defenses who were taking away the movement, we're switching without giving up easy cutting lanes. I don't think he drove as much offensive value in the playoffs at times, while also, like you said, like I think very good defensive player, but not a game-changing defensive player. Like the Golden State had game-changing defensive players around him to where Clay could kind of hone in on just being like the on-ball guy who's going to press up and try to fight through screens, while Draymond, Iggy, Andrew Bogut do all of like the heavy lifting stuff on the defensive side of the ball. So I do think Clay is someone that kind of fell in between the group of like the guys I strongly considered and the guys I didn't consider at all. He was kind of in this middle space where it's like Clay deserves some light consideration, but I do think some of the offensive limitations, along with not being a game changer defensively, prevent him from approaching real top 10 value.
I just think there's 10 really good shooting guards and he just doesn't make it. I echo a lot of the same sentiments. I'm not going to speak negatively of Clay. You guys kind of outlined the strengths and weaknesses. But yeah, really good player. Just ultimately wasn't able to crack the top 10, but 7 points. Shout out to Klay Thompson. We are now on to 12th because these two are also tied. Don't worry, the ties are coming to an end after this. This is the last tie of the video. These guys have 20 points, so quite a big jump up from Klay Thompson. So these are the guys you start to see appear more frequently on lists. Let's see. These guys, we'll start with calling player A. This guy was on Casual's list at 8, KB's list at 7, Sean's list at 10, Ron's list at 10, Real Talk's list at 8, Penn's list at 8, Damien's list at 10, and 2 of you guys had him on. It's this bottom row here. He was your number 10, Armand, and Tyler, he was your number 8. And then the other player was on, let's see, he was on, no one over here. Where do we first find him? He was on Lowe's list at 10, Carson's list at 7, Brad's list at 7. He was then on Damien's list at 8. Armand, he was on your list again at 9. Tyler, he was on your list at 10. And John D, he was on your list at 6. So we'll start with player A, the one who is on Armand's list at 10. It is Vince Carter. Talk to us.
Vince Carter, I think, is one of those players where the longevity really, like, it's a rare case where the longevity hurts his legacy in terms of like the public's perception of him. For the majority of like most fans' life, he's a role player. Like half of his career, he's a role player essentially. And then even when you go back to those Nets years where he's competing on these teams with Kidd and like those years, that's normally his prime, the ages that he's at. He's just not the same player he was in Toronto, in my opinion. Not the same scorer, not the same shooter. But in that, for my peak that I picked for him, which was that 2000 to 2002 stretch, really focusing on that 2001 season, truly one of the best offensive forces in the league. The tough shot-making ability that he has from 3, especially in that season, like the amount of shots that he's taking for the era is good. The difficulty on the shots that he's taking is good. Now, the mid-range game hurts him a little bit, but that's also the case for a lot of the guys of his era. A lot of guys are just taking inefficient 2s, long mid-range, all of that. So it hurts him a little bit, but I'm not going to hold that too much against him because that's just how the game was played in that era. But when the defense has to worry about the 40% from 3 that he's shooting over those seasons, on top of the fact that he's one of the most athletic players in the league, driving to the rim percentage could have been better, but like just the athletic freak that he is, putting pressure on the rim at that rate while also shooting 40% from 3. I'm very high on Vince Carter, apparently higher than most people just during that stretch.
I when I submitted my original list, I had Vince Carter 8th, but I have since bumped him up to 7 in the week since I sent you that list.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, no way.
No, I have gotten very high on Vince Carter. I think it's a very short-lived peak. Like I would even probably cut 02 out of that. Like it really is like some of 2000 and then the 2001 season. That 2001 season is one of the more underrated campaigns. I think like I wish, obviously I wasn't around to experience this, but like I know just from doing the research, like during that time, Vince Carter was like damn near the face of the league. Like alongside like the mega stars, like everyone was like, Vince Carter was putting Toronto on his back and doing things that like they were like, is this guy going to be the next megastar in the NBA? And then he never really progressed. Like he peaked as like a 22-year-old. So it's really weird. But I do think that short-lived stretch where his athletic peak intersect like with the skill level made him one of the most uniquely impactful players across the board. And it's so insane to think about. Like, I'm someone who very much values possession influence, like your influence on the possession battle. And Vince Carter might be the most extreme example of anyone we're going to talk about, of a player who was a legit offensive engine while also checking these other barometers. So he, in the 2001 season, averaged 2.3 offensive rebounds a game and only 2.2 turnovers a game. So that's the signal of a guy who's grabbing extra possessions for his team on the offensive glass, despite being their lead creator at times, averaging 28 points a game and 4 assists, but then also not turning the ball over at all. And then those things ramp up to an even more extreme level in the playoffs. The 0-1 playoffs, it's 2 rounds. They push Philly to game 7. He ends up playing 45 minutes a game, averaging over 3 offensive rebounds. He ramped up to 5 assists a game and stayed at only 2 turnovers. And he led a plus 7.5 playoff offense relative to his opponent's defensive ratings. The Raptors had one other 10-point per game scorer in 2001, and it was Antonio Davis, who averaged 13 points a game. Vince Carter at times was the only guy who could break down a defense himself. And he just was such a uniquely talented player. He could play with or without the ball. He could get to the rim. He got to the free throw line at a great rate. He did settle for the long 2 a lot, but he made 44% of them. And a 44% long 2 is still above average half court offense in the early 2000s. So that really wasn't a detriment. And then, like you said, he was a volume 41% 3-point shooter that season. So for him to check all of those boxes while also not being a defensive liability, in many cases, actually, I think he might have added a little bit of value through his defensive playmaking and his rim protection at that position. I do think Vince comes away as like one of the most impactful shooting guards of all time, in my opinion, 7th highest peak among 2 guards.
Yeah, for single seasons, I definitely see the case. My issue was, and this is where it comes down to the different ways people do the list, I just don't see a year outside of 01 where he's playing at this level. So when I'm looking at multi-year peaks, he's kind of letting himself down. But yeah, 01 Vince, I mean, I hear about him a lot because I frequent a show where there's a Raptors fan who will tell us that Vince Carter was the second coming. And for a lot of the time, I actually don't disagree with a lot of what he says about 01 Vince, because I do think he was that good. I do think his combination of jump shooting and athleticism was special. My bigger issue with Vince was, and I think Armand touched on it briefly, the dunks skew the actual finishing ability. Like, that was his biggest weakness as a scorer. No one will ever believe it because it's Vince Carter. His touch around the rim was lackluster. And that was the thing that I think let him down more from the knock. It wasn't, in my opinion, the mid-range jump shooting. That was just kind of the byproduct of the era, and he was one of the best. And it definitely isn't the 3-point shooting, because he was one of, if not, no, he wasn't the best. There was someone else, but he was one of the best. And I do appreciate what Tyler said about the offensive rebounds and not turning the ball over. And I think that's something that you'll notice amongst shooting guards. It is the ability to be an offensive engine while being a turnover suppressor. That is like the big difference between a shooting guard and a point guard. A point guard is probably going to do more facilitating and creating for their teammates. But a shooting guard is, you can drive offense through them and they won't turn the ball over. That's meant to be what a shooting guard is. It's not meant to just be a point guard who can't pass. Like, and that's what people have seemed to make it into. No, there is actually like a value behind being a shooting guard, and I think Vince Carter drove a lot of that value in 01. My issue with Vince Carter is just he didn't drive that value in many years outside of 01, and that's why I didn't have him on the list. If it was single season peaks, he would have been closer to making my list. Now, would he have made it? I don't know, but he definitely would have been closer. So it's funny, the guy with one of the longest careers ever is being held out of my list due to longevity. It's crazy. But John D, was there anything you wanted to say about Vince Carter?
I pretty much echo the same sentiment. Majority of my guys on my list have like 3 to 4 year peaks. I think there's one guy on my list that has less than 4 years, to be completely honest, or 2 guys. So that's where I kind of like push back a little bit with having Vince Carter on my list. But as far as that single season, like you guys said, one of the more underrated shooters in the league at the time, Really good on-ball scorer. Just I couldn't put him in there just because I didn't think it was sustained for as long as you would have liked.
I'm gonna come right back to you because the other player who was tied with Vince was Anthony Edwards.
Yes.
And you had him at 6th, which is the highest I think anyone had him. So talk to us.
There's somebody under him that I swapped out, but I didn't. Anyway, as far as Anthony Edwards, I think Anthony Edwards is really good. And when you add the 3-point shooting on top of that, just last year or the year before last, where he was shooting 40% from 3 on almost 10 attempts throughout the entire regular season after
again this year.
Exactly. And it's like that happening to the level that it had that season, where he's already one of the better downhill players in the league, now being able to add a 40% 3-point shot off the dribble and off the catch while still being a really good off-ball player as well. It's like, how do you guard that? And you see in the postseason where you need a multitude of athletic, stocky defenders to stop an Anthony Edwards, to the point where OKC were shifting their entire defense in the postseason. And one of those games, he got Dante DiVincenzo and Nickeil Alexander-Walker like 25, 30 ball games in the postseason. Like, there's still like a multitude of improvements I would like to see Anthony Edwards make, obviously as an on-ball creator and a decision maker. But when he wants to lock in transition, I think he could be one of the better transition players in the league. He's already one of the best 3-point shooters in basketball. He's gotten much better as an off-ball player. He's gotten much better with his mid-range game, and he's still one of the best downhill scoring threats in the league. So when I look at Anthony Edwards and I see it translate to the postseason to the level that it does, I mean, he absolutely fried my Lakers. I give it to him. I think I would probably say 7 now because him and my 7 swapped maybe a couple of days ago. I was like, yeah, I'm tripping a little bit, but I'm really high on Ant, and I think he's going to be much better this year. Like, I think he's going to be much better this year with LaMelo Ball being able to play next to him. So I don't know. Maybe I'm early, but I think he can still climb.
Yeah, I mean, I had him on the list as well. I had him at 9, so I'm high on him as well. I think, again, I did the 3-year peaks. The 2024 is not on the same caliber as 2025 and 26. If you do just the 2-year peak, I think he has an argument to get higher towards where you have him. I did, and this is blasphemy to some people. I don't want to spoil who it is, but I did consider putting him at 8 above my number 8. So
interesting.
I did really, really heavily think about it. So I don't know. I kind of think I wish I did now. The playoff translation is huge for me. And this is the thing. I don't think this will be his peak. So I definitely see him climbing up this. So if we did this again in a few years, I think he'd be as high as 5, 6. We'll see.
Okay. He ain't touching 24, but it's okay.
But he has that potential in my eyes as far as like being on this shooting guard list as high as 5. Yeah, just what held me back is the 2024 season is not on the same level as 25, 26. But just the playoff translation that he has where, I'm high on a guy like Shea, even for his regular season scoring, what he puts together. But there has been some concern as far as the playoff translation of that, just because of the way he gets his mid-range buckets. As far as Anthony Edwards, there's no concern of that for me because he is a difficult shot maker. He can stretch the floor from 3 and at an efficient rate. I mean, he's shot 10 and then I think 8 this past season attempts per game, shooting 40% from 3. I'm very high on that. Yeah, I think I would just like you said, the decision-making to be a little better. But that's not as important to me. Again, this is the shooting guard position. I'm not looking for incredible playmaking from my shooting guard. It's a bit different in this era, I guess, where I'm looking more for it now than I would from a guy in like the 80s or something like that. But ultimately, the playoffs matter the most to me, and he's shown he's a playoff riser year in, year out. So
I think go ahead.
I was gonna say I had Ant 10th. I also had him on my list, but I do need to push back on some points here because I don't want to come off as the Ant hater because we all had him on the list. But like, John D, you brought up like when he wants to be a transition player, he can be, but he doesn't. Like he doesn't drive any transition value. And I do think for an athletic freak like Ant, like I really hope LaMelo kind of injects some life into that because I do think we're talking about a completely different caliber of player if Ant completely buys into running because transition offense is the most efficient offense in basketball. And he very much slows the game down. He wants to get to his spots. He wants to play methodical. And I do think that kind of backtracks from his athleticism a little bit. The other thing and I just saw someone else bring this up in the chat. His playoff rising has always been against extremely flawed defenses. Every single time he's ran into like an actual elite playoff defense, his scoring has fallen off a cliff. Like Dallas 2024 was like a major step down from what he did against Denver in the second round. And then 2025, you get it again with OKC. Whereas, yes, they went to some extreme coverages and he did read them well as a playmaker, I think, but you saw clear flaws as a scorer, especially the in-between thing. It was kind of like, yes, you can't stay in front of him at the point of attack, but if you come with late help at the paint, he doesn't access that intermediate area out of drives. It's like once he's committed to a drive, once he gets that blow by, he's trying to get all the way to the rim and trying to finish over rim protectors. And there were so many times in that series where he just tried to out vertical Chet Holmgren and couldn't, and his scoring just like in the paint fell off a cliff because he didn't have the short pull-up jumper or the floater that he could access like some of these other high-level scorers in the playoffs, like a Shea, for example. And I do think like this year in 2026, he started to access the mid-range a little bit more, the short mid-range especially, and I felt like he showed better use of pace. But then he got injured in the playoffs, so we never got to really see what that would look like against Wemby, which is where I think it would have been the same thing where it's like, can he access that intermediate area when teams take away the rim? And I do think it's the combination of, yes, Ant's scoring forces such extreme coverages that it's hard for me to not get him on the list just off the fact that the first step in combination with the top tier pull-up three-point shooting, it's like defenses have to shift their entire scheme around this, and that comes with inherent value. Like Minnesota, you brought up DiVincenzo having a huge playoff game, Alexander Walker having a huge playoff game. That's a function of teams having to go to extreme lengths to prevent Ant from getting his game off. But I do think we've seen a clear signal that the best defenses in the league with great vertical drop bigs don't have as much trouble preventing Ant from like hitting these 30-point per game thresholds. And then he doesn't have some of that other influence in other areas. Like he's not a guy who's a great turnover suppressor or a great rebounder, and he doesn't really force turnovers on defense. Although the defense to me is the weird thing to value with Ant, because like he's a clear plus on the ball, but if he's dying on so many screens and also like having spacey off-ball moments, how valuable is that really? I think he's a like a comfortable positive, but not quite all defensive level. I do think the best version of Ant is one that buys into transition, shows a little bit more growth as a decision maker and as an in-between scorer, and then a more consistent defensive presence. And I think like playing off of LaMelo Ball this next season, we'll probably see another tier jump from Anthony Edwards.
Yeah, I definitely think with the level of transition play that the Timberwolves could get at with like Rudy, Jaden McDaniels, Io, I think they could be one of the better transition teams in basketball, or like maybe top 5. But I think LaMelo really is probably going to open that up, especially with like the defensive effort, because with how much on-ball responsibility Ant had last year, you could probably see like the regression defensively over the past few years to where he's not as locked in on the ball anymore. Hasn't been that great to me off the ball as well. So maybe with like less responsibility, we can see that defense start to gear back up. But we've seen that with a lot of players where it's like, yeah, they started out really good as an on the ball defensive player, and then they just start getting more offensive responsibility, and then they never go back to being that defender that we once saw. For example, like a DeJounte Murray. Like DeJounte Murray was somebody that towards like once he got more offensive responsibility, the defense kind of fell off a cliff, because like I really looked at him as one of the better young defenders in the league. And then once responsibilities come up, they start to fall off. So who knows if we get that back from Ant? But I definitely think like with the like added transition play with LaMelo Ball, who's constantly looking to run and feed guys in transition, I think that would definitely get better. But I definitely do think you made some really solid points with like the athletic defenses or just top tier defenses being able to put something in front of him, just because they have like the speed to rotate after he beats somebody at the point of attack, or you have this vertical big like a Chet or a Wemby that could stop him at the rim. And that's where like the decision making starts to come in. Is like, do you make the pass? Do you stop on a dime and take the pull-up jump shot, or do you try and go all the way to the rim? So I definitely get where you come from.
Number 11. This guy missed out on the top 10 by 2 points. He had 32 total points. He was on Dream's list at 7, Gifted's list at 10, Will's list at 10, KB's list at 6, Joel's list at 9. Swiper's list at 9. Carson's list at 5. ZZ's list at 7. He was on Tyler's list at 9. John D, he was on your list at 7. And he was on my list at 10. So number 11 is Reggie Miller.
Damn.
Okay.
John D, you had him the highest of anyone up here. So talk to us about Reggie Miller, who you said
I mean, one of the only guards to lead the league in true shooting. One of the best playoff scorers of his era. Like, one, if Steph Curry never existed, the greatest off-ball player of all time, in my opinion. If Steph Curry never existed, one of the greatest off-ball players of all time. The decision-making just off the ball, like where it's like, okay, I know you guys are about to overcommit on this pin down, so I'm just going to cut back door to the rim, and now I have an easy layup. The ability to get to the free throw line, even with like limited on-ball creation, the three-point shooting, the shooting in general, the off the dribble shooting, the ability to make quick passes in transition, off the catch, just being a solid playmaker, and again, being one of the most efficient playoff scorers in the era. Now, I will say this: from the years I picked, I had like 89 to 93 or 89 to 94, somewhere around that range. His efficiency was very high towards the beginning of those years, but it was like one series. And then his like 94 year where they made like a really deep run, his efficiency kind of was like around league average or just over league average, to where it wasn't like as historical.
No, you're downplaying. You're downplaying. They were facing like the top 2 defenses. So relative to the other team's defense, he was still hitting like plus 8% in those playoff runs. I think he was plus 11% in 95 playoff run. Reggie is unbelievable. I was gonna say it's funny because John D had him higher than I did. And even like a lot of the ways you're describing him, I feel like you're downplaying him. Like you were like, he's one of the most efficient playoff scorers of his era. No, he's like the most efficient playoff scorer in NBA history. His playoff scoring numbers are so ridiculous, and it's because he hit like a unique intersect of movement shooting with like 1-2 dribble pull-up game. He had like a 20-foot floater in his bag. Very underrated arsenal. Like if you ran him off the line, he would get inside the arc and make something happen. And then also was like the highest free throw rate player in the league. So like the combination of movement shooting and the ability to always make the open shot with the difficult shot making and then also the free throw rate made him like such a hyper efficient scorer in a time where I feel like there wasn't as much appreciation for like hyper efficient scoring and what that did to defenses. He kind of suffers from the fact that like, this is a similar thing that happens with Dirk, where they were the slowest paced offense in the league, like every single year. It was the Larry Brown at first, where it was, we're going to walk the ball up court. We're going to get everyone in the right spot. We're going to set some screens, get into the offense, get our shot up with 8 seconds left on the clock. And then Larry Bird kind of followed a similar thing with the offensive system. So because of that, he had less opportunities to put up stats. So like when you look at his regular season scoring numbers, it's like 21 points a game, 22 points a game. But on like a per 75 possession basis, on a per possession basis, it's more like 25, 26 points per game. And then in the playoffs, it's more 27, 28 points per game. If you look at it on a per possession basis, on plus 10, plus 11, plus 12% efficiency. And the most impressive thing to me is that he did it every year. The Pacers were a top playoff offense. They were unbelievably good. They were in 1995, they were a plus 7 playoff offense. 1998, the year that they pushed the Bulls to 7, plus 7.5 playoff offense. 99 plus 8 playoff offense. And the 2000 finals run again, a plus 8 playoff offense. That's 4 straight years as a top, 2 playoff offense in the league with everything structured around Miller's off-ball game. I just think like the only reason I couldn't get him higher, like I think that is one of the greatest superpowers in NBA history. He was such a ridiculous off-ball scorer and so ridiculously efficient, but it's like, that's kind of where the value stops. Like he had some playmaking value off of the gravity and sharp decision-making. He took good care of the ball. Like his nature of play style definitely helped turnover suppression, but not driving any value defensively, not getting on the glass at all, not forcing any turnovers. Like his value was very hyper-focused on the movement shooting. But I do think that did drive enough value on elite playoff offenses with proof of concept for an entire decade to get into my top 10. I do think the peak was like 94, 95, mid 90s.
Yeah, I had Reggie at 10. I do think the issue with Reggie Miller is he was so good for so long. It is once again hard to identify when did he actually peak as a player. And it's why I'm really high on Reggie, but not because of his peak. It's more so just the sustained excellence, which is why I couldn't really get him much higher. But yeah, one of the best playoff scorers, really ever. And I think the crazy thing was that he shot so many jump shots but got to the free throw line at the rate in which he did while being like an 88-90% guy. So just being able to bolster your efficiency by grifting, let's call it what it was, and getting to the line at that rate without like having real self-creation juice. It was, and I've said it before, like Steph is the greatest off-ball player ever because gravity, whatever you call. But to me, the greatest off-ball mover is Reggie Miller. I just think the tricks he had up his sleeve to get open, find slivers of daylight, to read overplays, to manage to just get his shot off in any which way. He is, in my opinion, the best off-ball mover of all time. And that was able to translate to the playoffs. And he wasn't a typical offensive engine. He wasn't someone who you're going to put the ball in their hands and run spread pick and roll. But he is someone where his movement is the initial domino for a lot of the Pacers offense. So when Tyler's reading out the +7 and whatever playoff offenses, Reggie Miller is driving a lot of that value. Now, I'm not going to give him all the credit because, once again, team sport, but he is driving a lot of value for one of the best playoff offenses of his era while being one of, if not the most efficient playoff scorers of his era. Routinely around +7, +8. He has series at +10 against some of the best defenses in the league. Just playing at a really high level consistently. But yeah, my issues with Reggie Miller just didn't drive much value defensively. Wasn't going to do much as an on-ball creator. Most of his playmaking was going to be gravity dependent. And unfortunately, due to the nature of their slow-paced offense, you didn't get to maximize the ability of like transition threes and all that stuff. Like they could have unlocked a lot more with a guy like Reggie Miller. So they didn't squeeze all the juice out of the orange, but about as much as possible, in my opinion. And that's why I had him in 10th place. Spoiler alert, of his archetype, it is usually the same three guys who get put in that group. Reggie was the highest for me, which means that he was the only one who made my list. But yeah, really good. But speaking of the highest, the guy above him by 2 points is the last one of that tree. So I think might as well just group them together. He had 34 points, and he is actually 10th place. It is Ray Allen. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, Ray.
Yeah, Ray Allen was 10th place. For everyone who had him on the list, John D, you had him in 9. Pirate had him in 10. Ox had him in 10. Jordan had him in 10. Real Talk had him in 10. ZZ had him in 9. Carson had him in 10. Swiper had him in 10. Low had him in 8. Sean had him in 9. Riv had him in 9. KB had him in 10. Will, Gifted, and Casual had him in 9. And Delsky and Dream both had him in 6. So the thing about Ray Allen is a lot of people just consistently had him towards the bottom of their top 10. And those points just started to add up. So he came in with 34 points and is the first member of our top 10. But John D, you were the only one up here who had him on your list. So talk to us about Ray Allen.
You know, I love Supersonics Ray Allen. Just a lot of people would make the argument that he peaked with the Bucks, which in my opinion is his athletic peak. But I really like the off-ball play with the Supersonics a lot more. I like that he was able to make decisions off the catch. The ball handling was still really good. The mid-range scoring was really well. He was an underrated passer to me. I don't think he was as good as Reggie in these aspects, but I still think he was a very solid on and off ball scorer, and also led or was a major big part of why the Supersonics were like a top 3 offense for 3 out of the 4 years that I selected. In 2003, 2004, I believe they were 2 or 3, right behind like the Mavericks and the Kings. And then the very next year, they're like number 2, right behind the Phoenix Suns. And then they fall off like a cliff. But I still think he was like a big component to why they were one of the better offenses in basketball, being able to move up and down the floor. His shot making was still very undervalued or underrated as well with what he was doing in that offense. And in the postseason, I think he was really good as well. So I think Ray Allen was definitely a big part of this list for me.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you, Mars, that I had Ray Allen just a touch under Reggie Miller. Neither made my list. I was the only one that didn't have Reggie on my list up here, but he was at number 12. He was just off the list. Ray Allen, I do really love as a 3-point shooter, again, in the same archetype as Reggie Miller. And I think gets hurt a lot by his later years, again, I think in public consciousness. Most people remember him for his Boston years. Most people remember him for his Miami years. So kind of gets underrated in a way on that point, but truly like one of the best offensive players in the league at his peak. Doesn't bring as much defensively value. I don't think he does as much in terms of the off-ball gravity that Reggie Miller had in terms of the playmaking either. So that's why I had Reggie just a touch above. But I did heavily consider like these guys that are like from 10 to 13, they were all like super, super close for me.
Yeah, I agree. I had Ray. Ray was probably my second cut. He's like in this same kind of range. Like with him and Reggie Miller, I do think you're splitting hairs and very just nitpicking. But I do think Ray's clear peak was the Bucks 01 season. That to me was the best version of Ray, because that's when he becomes like fully actualizes as a volume movement 3-point shooter. He had the pull-up 3-point game. He had the transition 3-point game while still having like the young buck athleticism that he came into the league with. And I think like, yeah, in that 01 season, he averages 24 points per 75 on plus 9% efficiency, then goes into, and he led the best offense in the league. The 01 Bucks were the number one offense. Then he goes into the playoffs, averages 26 points per 75 on plus 11% efficiency in a conference finals run that pushed Philly to 7 games with the number 2 playoff offense. So many would argue they actually would have beat Philly if Ray Allen didn't get hurt in the third quarter of game 7. That completely blew the game open for Philly. But the thing with Ray Allen, like everything you guys talked about makes complete sense. And I couldn't agree more. Like Ray Allen was the driver of elite offenses for half of a decade. One of the best shooters of all time, more dynamic than advertised. The only reason I give Reggie a very slight nod, like I think they're very similar in pretty much all of these categories. The difference for me is Reggie got to the line way more. And I just think that pushed his playoff scoring ceiling more than it did with Ray. Whereas Ray was a lot more volatile, couldn't always get to the free throw line, couldn't put as much pressure inside the arc at times. So it's like splitting hairs, but to me, Ray just falls on the side of barely outside the list, knocking on the door, and Reggie to me sneaks into the 9 spot.
Yeah, I struggle with Reggie and Ray. Both of them are like similar in the sense of I think their longevity is their biggest superpower as opposed to their peaks. But both very worthy inclusions of being in the top 10. I did similarly just value the free throw rate of Reggie Miller. I do think he is the better off-ball player compared to Ray Allen. Now, part of that is probably out of necessity because he wasn't as close. He wasn't close to the on-ball guy that Ray Allen was in terms of just the ability to create your own shot off the bounce. But ultimately, when you're scoring at the rate in which he did consistently against the elite postseason defenses, doesn't really bother me that you're not doing it in the ways that maybe other people are capable of. So I favored Reggie Miller slightly more. I also did probably characterize Reggie Miller's peak as slightly longer, so that gave me the edge. But Ray Allen at 10, Reggie Miller at 11 doesn't really bother me either way. Before we move into like the upper echelons and whatever, let's just recap where we've been so far. 10th place was Ray Allen. 11th place was Reggie Miller. 12th place was Anthony Edwards and Vince Carter. 14th place was Klay Thompson. 15th place was Brandon Roy and Sidney Moncrief. 17th place was David Thompson. 18th place was Sam Jones and Mitch Richmond. And 20th place was Pete Maravich, Devin Booker, and Joe Dumars. That is where we have got through so far. We are now on to number 9. Before we get on to number 9, couple super chats. Dobby Greg said, is the shooting guard position the position with the most aura/swag? MJ, Kobe, AI, and Anthony Edwards. Does the shooting guard position have the most swag?
I think so. I think that's a good argument there.
Yes, it's not close. It's not close.
Okay. Yep, Glaze. Okay.
It's not close.
And then he asked, is there less two-way stars now, or do we just nitpick them more now?
I think there's less two-way stars now. Like,
yeah,
I would say
I agree.
so.
Yeah, the league focuses more on making their stars offensive juggernauts.
yeah, I just think there's much. Yeah, I just think there's much more. When we look at past eras, when we look at some of the best offensive players in the league, we look at Jokic, Luka, these guys just.
I think it's harder, like with the pace and space of today's era, it's a lot harder to carry a big offensive load and then still be an impact defender. Whereas in the slower paced, like 4 people in the paint offenses you see in like the late 80s and early 90s, it's very hard to be a defensive liability. I feel like you have to be really bad defensively to be a defensive liability in that time. And more of the like offensive stars weren't like small guards. So it was like, if you were just big enough to be a body, you were probably not a bad defensive player. And then if you had like legit strengths on top of that, you were probably a very good defensive player during that time. So I do think it's like a combination of coaches focusing more on offense and then all for their stars. And then also it just being harder to do both in today's game.
Yeah, there's like when you see like, it's very rare where I would say maybe a top 10 offensive player in the league is also one of the more valuable defensive players. Like when we look at some of the best players in the league, you have Giannis, which might be an exception. Playoff Joel Embiid, he's a really solid defender. You like Jason Tatum, who's one of the more versatile defensive players in basketball. Cade Cunningham, exactly. And then Anthony Edwards had his little on-ball defense, or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander with his off-ball play. But it's like when we look at some of the better offensive players in the league today, they're not like shut down defenders like we would look at maybe more towards the 90s or the early 2000s. Like you would look at him, maybe a Tim Duncan or a Kevin Garnett or a Kobe Bryant in the early 2000s, where he was a really good on-ball defender. Just things of that nature. So I feel like it's just more of the evolution of the game. But a lot of people are going to look back at it on, oh yeah, guys don't play defense anymore. But
number 9, this guy had 37 points. So Reggie Miller at 11 had 32. Ray Allen at 10 had 34. Number 9 had 37. So very close between these 3 people. Let's see who had them on their list. Dream had this guy at 9. Delsky had him at 10. Casual had him at 10. KB had him at 8. Joel had him at 10. Swiper had him at 6. Chill had him at 8. Ox had him at 8. Penn had him at 6. Damian had him at 9. Tyler had him at 6. John D had him at 10. And I had him at 6. One of the more polarizing players on the conversations I frequent anyway. Tyler, talk to me about Manu Ginobili.
I can't believe he was this low, man. I'm honestly surprised. I mean, obviously, I'm probably like 100th percentile high on Ginobili compared to anyone else on this planet. But Manu Ginobili is everything you want in a player if your goal is to win a championship. Like maybe he's not gonna, and it's not even that he couldn't be the heavy lifting offensive player that these other guys were. It was just that like he never had to be. I think his superpower is the way he processed the game. He saw the game so quickly on both sides of the ball, and it's like it really stands out in his decision making. Greg Popovich emphasized the 0.5 second decision making. It was when you catch the ball, you need to make a decision in half a second. And Manu Ginobili was the king of that in terms of whether he was the one starting a possession, whether he was coming off a screen, whether he was catching the ball against a closeout, on the move, his extra passing, his quick slashing, everything he did to connect the offense is like, he's like the final boss of plug and play offensive players. He was a 3-point shooter in an era that didn't emphasize as much 3-point shooting. He got to the rim a ton. He got to the free throw line a ton. He had a very like hyper efficient shot diet without the mid-range game in an era, again, where the mid-range was the most heavily emphasized shot. So that allowed him to bolster his efficiency even more. He got better in the playoffs. He played more minutes in the playoffs. He was one of the only guys to leave basically every great playoff defense helpless. Like the 05 Pistons couldn't guard him, and they're one of the best defenses of all time. He just completely broke that series wide open with plus 15% relative true shooting in the NBA Finals. But then the other side of it is he was also an incredibly good defender, like an amazing defender. He could be on the ball. He could fight through screens. He had great length, great hands, but more importantly, he was a monster defensive playmaker because of the way he read the game. If he was behind the play, he was constantly blowing up actions, constantly being in the right spot at the right time, constantly forcing turnovers. And so it's like the collective value of all of these things he's doing is just like, okay, what can you really poke at? I think the one reason he's not higher on this list is I do think the lack of a mid-range game and the kind of like high octane playing at one speed at times could be a limiting factor if he was in a system that wanted him to do heavy lifting on offense. But in terms of just being a connective piece on a team that you're trying to win a championship with, he influences every single aspect of the game on both sides of the ball and can fit next to quite literally any archetype of player seamlessly. And I think he deserves a lot more credit for just like the way the Spurs were able to mold and craft their dynasty, and especially like how much they relied on him offensively. Like people remember the beautiful game Spurs. They don't remember the Spurs that in some of these playoff series in the mid 2000s would hit a brick wall offensively. And Manu was like a caffeine boost that just checked in and was like, oh, now we got our 10 points in 3 minutes. Manu was freaking awesome. And also, last thing I want to say, one of the best passers ever. And I feel like he never gets brought up in like all-time great passer discussions. Manu was freaking awesome, man.
Yeah, you're gonna realize that you are higher on Manu than 99% of people. I mean, I'm reading the chat now. There's outrage at the fact that he's even here. And then you're here asking why it's too low.
Like, there's more to the game.
They got me in the chat crying.
It's like my problem is it's like just because Manu wasn't a number one option doesn't mean he couldn't have been. And I feel like that's like an important distinction to make. Not that I'm over here saying Manu would have been 30 points per game on his own team, but it's like I think Manu was the number one offensive player for like 3 of those championships. And it's like, why do we not acknowledge that he was the best offensive player while being a top defensive player on a dynasty? It's so absurd to me. Like, why do we value like higher volume scoring seasons for 45 win teams more than proof of concept as the best offensive player for a ton of deep playoff runs and championships? I feel like we think about it backwards.
I get what you're saying because I'm in agreement with most of what you said. On the other hand, to push back on like the proof of concept stuff, some guys just never get that opportunity, so you never know what they would be in that role.
Yeah,
I'm in agreement that like he is one of the best connecting pieces, one of the best complementary pieces of all time. If you're looking to build a championship team and you have your like superstar, especially if they're a defensive player like Tim Duncan, he's perfect. Like he was perfect for what the Spurs needed. And I do genuinely think like for a ton of those years, he is their best offensive player. And I think he is probably top 10 on here if he's able to like be on the court more, but I just struggle with the fact that, and it moves me a little bit that he plays like more minutes in the playoffs still, obviously, but it's still around 30 minutes a game, 33 minutes a game. There's only, as impactful as he is as a player, there's only so much impact that he can have on the game in those limited minutes, in my opinion. But yeah, I think if you're not getting this like top tier superstar offensive leader, I think Manu is one of the first picks outside of that for sure.
Yeah, I also had Manu at 6, so me and Tyler, I guess, shared that spot. Where I diverge is like, I don't care if Manu Ginobili could score 30 points per game or not. Like, I'm not arguing Manu is 6th because if he was on his own team, he could. More so that I watched him play basketball and I just think he's better than the people you guys don't think he's better than. My biggest drawback with Manu Ginobili is that I question whether or not he could play more minutes with his style of play without just gassing out and it's essentially bleeding value with those extra minutes, because the frenetic pace and relentlessness he played with, can he do that for 37 minutes? Maybe not. And that's one of the questions I have. And then in terms of like could he be the number one guys, like when he lacks the in-between game that he did, that's where I would have more questions about could he just be the focal point of your offense on a team that's devoid of offensive options? Probably not, because his mid-range game wasn't great. It was more rim threes, free throws, and all of that stuff. But in order at that time to be an offensive number one, as people like to call it, you probably do need a more diverse mid-range game, and that's not what he had. But echoing a lot of Tyler's sentiment, he is. Let me just check the list. I'm fine saying he's the best passer here. I'm fine saying that. He might not be. At worst, he's top 3, but I'm fine saying he is the best passer here. That's how good I think he is at passing the basketball. The on-ball, off-ball combination is elite. The fact that he was able to generate threes for himself and play off the catch was elite. The fact that he could drive closeouts and extend advantages was elite. The quick processing, like Tyler said, was elite. The defensive stuff was elite. And yeah, I've been on the side for a while. From 2005 until, we'll call it 2011, because why not? Manu Ginobili was the best offensive player on the Spurs, in my humble opinion. And that's something I've been consistent on. I know that's, once again, a controversial take or whatever the case may be. But in my opinion, he was the best offensive player on the Spurs. So whenever people define number one option or whatnot, I don't know, being the best offensive player on your team, I don't know, that kind of shows me stuff. The reason Manu Ginobili is not higher is because the 5 names I have above him were better than him.
That's my thing. It's like the top 5 that I have above him are like the monster offensive engines, in my opinion. And I just don't think Manu is that. But I think it's like, you go down the list of like, what are you looking for if you're trying to build a champion? I think like you're choosing Manu over basically everyone. And maybe that makes him a role player. But if his role is driving winning more than you, I think that makes him better than you.
So quick question. Is Manu Ginobili the Michael Jordan of Derek White's?
Something like that.
It's a valid question.
I mean, I just love how it was phrased. I love it.
He's probably the Michael Jordan of Michael Jordans, probably.
Huh?
Okay.
It's a good point.
Yeah,
Right.
probably the
Manu
Michael
Jordan.
Jordans of Michael Jordan. So.
Oh.
I mean, I considered Manu Ginobili as high as 2, so you know.
No, you did not, brother.
My question for like anyone who's like baffled by Manu being this high on mine and Mars's list is like, what is the actual deficiency in his game that you watch with Manu in the playoffs for the Spurs? And it's like, man, I really wish he would have done this differently. Because it's like, if you're saying, oh, it's because he came off the bench, or it's, oh, because he only played 30 minutes. Like, just from a pure, like, on the court basketball perspective, what was he, like, lacking? That's my thing with Manu. It's not the hypothetical, could he have averaged 30 points per game? It's like, he did everything on the court for the Spurs when they needed him to do everything.
I don't think that's wrong. But I feel like him fitting exactly what the Spurs needed doesn't necessarily make him like in this, to me, top 6. It's a little much, because I don't want to heavily index on like him averaging 30. I don't need somebody to average 30 to be better than Manu. But I do feel like being the offensive number 1 does matter, especially when we're talking about peaks. Like, that's why, when it comes down to an all-time shooting guard list, when it gets to like Vince Carter or McGrady in the years that are outside their absolute peak, I would take Manu over them, because I think as a secondary player, Manu just adds more value there. But especially when we're talking about peaks, when it comes down to it, I'm going to take those guys that can carry my offense, that can be this offensive nucleus, as I think a lot of these guys that are in my top 10 can be. I don't think it's crazy to have Manu on the list. 6 is a little bit of a stretch, but
I do think he was the offensive nucleus, though. That's where we're diverging. Like, he didn't average 27.
Like in the 05 playoffs, he's playing like 35 minutes a game. And like I said, he just dissects the Pistons defense that was shutting down everybody except for Dwayne Wade.
Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I see the case. I see the case. Like, when you have somebody that can be your main facilitator, be your main ball handler, can come in and lead as a facilitator, a scorer who plays really good defense. I understand that. Maybe I'm not where y'all are yet. I'm not where y'all are yet, because I still look at him like, but man, could he really have, like, you know, and maybe I'm old fashioned, maybe, but I don't know, man. That's where I'm like, you know what, these guys are doing it night after night. I don't know.
It's so funny to me because Manu's one of those guys I keep like sneaky putting higher each year. I'm like, all right, I got away. Like I made this argument. I got away with him at 6. Like 2028, can I come back? Like, is he 4 now? Like, can I keep getting him up there? And like, I do think some of this other stuff, like we've brought up, is a deficiency. Like Mars brought up, like he didn't have a mid-range game and he really lacked like an in-between game. And I do think the Spurs crafted a scenario for him where he didn't have to access the mid-range as much. He could just lean into his strengths. And on a different team, yes, as a heavy lifter, like he wasn't an isolation creator in the way some of these other guys are. I also do think the minutes thing is really interesting because like, how do you compare Manu doing what he did in 33, 34 minutes to Allen Iverson doing what he does in 46 minutes? It's really hard to like bridge that gap. But I also think like Manu hitting a clear peak in like the 05, 06, 07 range where like he puts in multiple playoff runs at 35 minutes a game and he's starting most of the games. And closing all of the games. I do think that is a clear peak for me where I'm like, okay, there is proof that Manu is like the best offensive player on a championship team and giving every playoff defense immense issues, regardless of how they approached him, and really just like how that opened up everything for them system wise. And the other thing is like, I just think people really underrate his defense. Like he probably should have made multiple all defensive teams, and just like never really got that credit. And I don't know like what they were saying at the time to keep him out of that, but I do think he just like collectively checks so many boxes, and that just becomes so much more valuable than a guy who can like do offensive heavy lifting for a team that isn't even really going to be in position to win a championship.
Yeah, I guess I'm just higher on where he stood in the Spurs hierarchy offensively in his peak. To me, he was the best offensive player on the team in his peak. So I don't need to ask what would he look like as the best offensive player on the team in his peak, because I saw it and he was amazing. So yeah. But other people, if you think Tony Parker was better than him, or Tim Duncan was better than him, or I don't know who else it would be, then that would explain the disagreement. But for me, during those years, Ginobili was their best offensive player. I think he drove a lot of their lineups into success. For reference, I believe in the playoffs from 05 to 08, Parker and Duncan on the court without Ginobili had a neutral net rating. Like, but you add Ginobili into that, it's a +4. And then you just put any lineup assortment with Ginobili on the court, they're winning every time. And once again, on-offs are not the end all be all. I'm not saying, oh yeah, look at the on-offs. But at some point, Ginobili on the court leads to winning every time. I don't think that's coincidental. And this is a Spurs team that was devoid of offensive pieces in general, like around Duncan, Parker, and Ginobili. So whatever assortment of lineups you have where it's only 2 of them or 1 of them, is going to be bad offensive players around them. So anyone being able to drive positive offense in those minutes, you're doing a lot of heavy lifting for those groups. Ginobili from 05 to 2011, without Parker or Duncan on the court, was driving a +3 offense. Now, the counterpoint, I guess, would be that you think he was doing that a lot against bench units. And then I guess the only counter I can give you would be watch the game. So I don't know, like that's all I can really help you with on that. And per Data Baller, he's doing that with -3.2 offensive help, which means his teammates on average are egregious offensively, and he's driving a +3 offense, which is really, really good. So yeah, that's it on Manu Ginobili from me.
I've got one more stat to throw at you because you brought up the on-offs, and I love me a good on-off stat. From 2003 to 2011, Manu played in 122 playoff games. The Spurs with him on the court had a +8 net rating. With him off the court, they had a -7 net rating. That's a 9-year, 122 game sample with a +15 playoff swing during a time where the Spurs won 3 championships. It's an insane signal to me that it's like, it's very hard to overlook like how much he pops up as like the consistent presence in their best lineups over and over and over again in the playoffs.
I just think if you're talking about whatever he averaged, I don't even know what Manu Ginobili averaged, like 16, 17 points. Like, I think you're just missing it. I don't know what else to tell you. I just think you're missing it if you're just minimizing it to he didn't score enough points, therefore he wasn't as good as these guys. It's like, I don't think that's true. But we spoke enough about managing him. I mean, once again, I'm talking myself into it. Like I said, I considered him as high as 2, but I might be underrated him. He might need to go number 1. But he was number 9 ultimately. That is where he finished.
Okay,
He finished in 9th place.
Okay.
Like we getting it. Like I understand.
I knew this was gonna happen. But it's cool.
Okay, good.
To save everyone,
let's remember where he's at, and let's remember where
he is
where
9th. Yeah, he is.
Let's just
Watch out. He is 9th. And I do think it's relevant. He had 37 points. 8th place had 80 points. So there is a gargantuan gap between Ginobili, Ray Allen, and Reggie Miller, and 8 up. So these are seen as pretty big. It's noticeable. So this guy with 80 points, I think we're approaching like one of the first people who is on every list. Let me just pull it up so I have everything prepared. Sorry. It's hard to switch between all of these things. This guy was, and then the first list I look at, he wasn't on it. Funny. So Delsky had him in 8th. Casual had him in 6th. Gifted had him in 8th. Will had him in 8th. Riv and Joel had him 8th. Sean had him 7th. Lowe had him 6th. Carson had him 9th. Brad had him 9th. ZZ had him 6th. Chill had him 4th. Ron had him 8th. Real Talk had him 9th. Jordan had him 9th. Ox had him 5th. Pirate had him 9th. Penn had him 7th. Damien had him 7th. Armand, you had him 5th. Tyler had him 7th. John D, you did not have him. And I had him in 9th. So we are talking about Clyde the Glide Drexler. I'm going to start with you, John D, because you didn't have him. Talk to us.
Yeah, he really just slipped my mind, to be completely honest. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Like, he slipped my mind completely. He definitely would have made an argument for lower 9, 10. But
I would have took Ginobili off your list, so good job.
Possibly. But
good job.
yeah. But I like Clyde Drexler's game. I feel like he was really well rounded as a scorer. I think he was a really solid mid-range shooter, and he was a really solid transition player. But I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't like as too moved by Drex. Like it was solid enough for me to have him on like lower side 9 or 10, but he genuinely just slipped my mind. And there's somebody else that slipped my mind that may come up a little later in the list that I probably would have had over him as well. So
I think I had him the highest out of all of us. I think I had him. I had him 5th. I think he's the highest on my list out of all of us. I just don't think there's many holes in his game for the era. Really, just like I know everyone calls him an MJ Light, but like I say that in the most complimentary way possible. Like his all around game truly is like incredible. He shows you the volume scoring ability. Again, not to MJ level, that's why he's light, but he shows the ability to be able to scale it down and be more of a playmaker throughout his prime. I think I had his prime years as like 90 to 92, I want to say. Proves it in his playoff runs as well. And also one of the better rebounding guards ever. I think that gets super underrated. He has a season where he's averaging insane like offensive rebounds. I don't know the exact season.
3.7 in 89.
Yeah. So just crazy. I think he gets a little underrated defensively as well. I don't think he hits the like offensive like highs that maybe some of these other guys do, but I do also think like had he played next to say Hakeem, who he ends up playing with later, if he played with him like earlier in his career, I don't think he has any problem again scaling down his scoring ability and playing right next to him and being just this elite player right next to anybody, to be honest. I don't even think it has to be Hakeem. And I think that's what adds a lot of value to me to Clyde, is I just think he could play with almost anybody and he would have been fine, especially in the 90s where like 3-point shooting is not necessarily like the biggest focus if you're not like as a secondary star.
Yeah, you made some great points. I think a great sign for Clyde is he has by far his most efficient scoring season in 95 when he gets into that off-ball role playing off Hakeem as a second option. And that version of Clyde, like he's obviously still very good, but he wasn't early 90s Clyde or late 80s Clyde even as an athlete. And I do think, yes, the best version of Clyde is one that's playing off of other creators. And that is kind of like the one hang up with Clyde. I had him 7th. I ended up bumping him down to 8th. The one hang up is I do think like you don't get as much on-ball creation for himself as you get with some of these other guys. Like he's not this monster isolation presence, but he is still like a good on-ball scorer, a good slasher, gets to the rim, gets to the line while being one of the best playmakers that we're going to talk about, like a very, very good passer. And just another one of those guys, kind of like what I talked about with Manu, who just pops up as like checking a lot of different boxes. Like he plays on this futuristic Portland offense, one of the most fun teams to watch ever. I would definitely recommend going back and watching those early 90s Blazers, him and Terry Porter. Amazing to watch. But like getting out in transition, influencing that part of the game, being a great connective passer, like you said, getting on the offensive glass more than pretty much any shooting guard in NBA history. Taking decent care of the ball. He had some decently high turnover seasons, but never like an actual issue. I think it's just like the hang up of he wasn't a top tier creator in some of these, in the way some of these other guys were. And defensively, I think he added value, but like you said, not like a real like crazy game changer defensively, more of a defensive playmaker, more of a guy who's going to like gamble for steals and get his hands everywhere, use his length and athleticism to make high leverage plays, but not as consistent with the possession to possession value as some of the other two-way juggernauts. I do think Clyde is one guy who also, I don't remember who I said this about earlier. I think it was Joe Dumars, who suffers from like not everything happened at the same time and came together at the same time for him, where it's like, I brought up in 89, this guy averages 3.7 offensive rebounds and 2.7 steals a game. If you get that type of possession influence with the superior shot creation and scoring he then shows in 92, that would then make him good enough to be into my like top 5, like where you had him. But I do think like the fact that him becoming more of a creator then detracted from some of the other like complementary skills he had. It just brings him down just a touch, but still firmly in my list. And I could get him probably as high as number 6.
Yeah, Clyde Drexler's amazing. Really that simple. Falls victim to the fact that obviously he wasn't the best 2 guard in the league, but I do love the offensive rebounding. Whenever people talk about guard rebounders, I always make sure to bring up Clyde Drexler because I think it's ridiculous that you have a guard averaging nearly 4 offensive rebounds, persistent in crashing the glass, forcing turnovers. When you have one player who single-handedly can generate 4 or 5 opportunities for your team, that moves the needle. Now, maybe the teams didn't know it as much, like they didn't know the exact numbers for it in 1990, but they still knew that there was value in someone forcing turnovers and getting second chance opportunities, and Clyde Drexler did that. Now, where he falls slightly behind and why I had him at 9 was just a few hang-ups with just the ability as a self-creator and a scorer. But really and truly, I could get him at 8. 8 and 9 for me, I could go either way. I would struggle to get him higher than that personally, but I don't have much bad to say about Clyde Drexler. Obviously, like he wasn't the greatest ball handler, but he did operate really well off the basketball. Really good cutter, like I said, crushing the offensive glass, could make the mid-range jump shot, tremendous athlete in transition. Just did a lot of little things, which I do think added a lot of value for his offense, which is why I have him in my top 10. But probably maxed out around 8th for me. Anyway, we are now on to number 7. This guy had 2 more points than Clyde Drexler. So Clyde Drexler had 80 points. This guy had 82. He was left off, I think, more lists than Clyde was, but he was also higher on some lists. He was number 4 on Delsky's list. Number 5 on Gifted's list. 7 on Will and Riv's list. 6 on Joel's list. 5th on Sean's list. 9th on Lowe's list. He was 8th on Swiper, Carson, Brad, and ZZ's list. He was 7th on Chill's list. 9th on Ron's list, 6th on Jordan and Real Talk's list, 7th on Ox's list, 3rd on Pirates list, 7th on Armand's list. He wasn't on Tyler's list, and he was 7th on mine. This is the Iceman, George Gervin. Similar to last time, I'm going to start with Tyler because you left him off. John D said it was an oversight from him, but why did you leave George Gervin?
He would have been on mine.
George Gervin, I'm so high on George Gervin as a scorer. One of the best scorers in NBA history, just ridiculous efficiency, ridiculous slashing, ridiculous mid-range game, with or without the ball, just unbelievably talented scorer. But like I said earlier, for me, all of the guys that made my top 10 complemented their scoring with something else. And I think Gervin has an argument to be a top 10 scorer of all time, actually. Like, I think Gervin is approaching top 10 all-time scorer conversations, but that is quite literally all of his value on the basketball court. And I do think if we're just isolating, like, yes, as a 2-guard, everything else is going to be covered, and I just need this guy to be my scoring option, I do think Gervin would be a lot higher on my list. And I did even give him strong consideration. He was one of my first 2-3 guys off. But in terms of like influencing different areas of the game, not a great playmaker, maybe a negative defensively. And I do think those things were like real impact limitations for him. But I do think like high end, if you're higher on some of those other things, like maybe you value his length more defensively. Maybe you think if he was asked to do more creating, he could have for others. I think you could get him like higher up on this list, like 7, 6. But I do think just him being like almost all of his scoring or almost all of his value being isolated on just scoring the basketball, to me kind of takes away from his overall impact.
I agree that a lot of his value was driven by his scoring, but he was just so damn good at scoring.
He was.
Yeah. So me and Armand both had him the highest up here. We both had him 7. I do think there was some value to the fact that like he could get in the passing lanes and he could block some shots. Now he couldn't stay in front of anyone like ever, but the off-ball stuff, just being a threat to block someone's shot, I do think that adds some value. And those Spurs teams, like he was driving good offense as just a scorer, like for as negative of a connotation as just the scorer gets. But in 78, they were the number 2 ranked offense. In 79, they were top 3. In 80, they were top 3. Like he was a driving force, the driving force of really good offenses. So, I don't think the playmaking limitations were really damaging his ability to impact offense at a high level. Now, if he was like a high level playmaker who maybe didn't turn the ball over as much as he did, I think that would just be the difference between him being 7th for me and him being in my top 5 firmly. I don't think it's enough to personally have him outside the top 10, just because on or off the ball, quick hits or slow methodical isolations, you wasn't going to stop George Gervin from putting the ball in the basket in any setting, whether that's the playoffs. I know they didn't have a lot of deep postseason runs, and part of that is because they just weren't that good of a team. But him individually, he still put the ball in the basket in the playoffs. I think he led the playoffs in scoring 4 times, maybe 5 times. I don't know. And then he obviously led the NBA in scoring, I think 4 times as well. Just the length, the ability to shoot over the top, the finger roll is obviously something that a lot of people remember or view as like the iconic shot of George Gervin. I think that's more of an indicator of his touch more than like the frequency. It was just his touch was freakish. Like if he anywhere within 16 feet, it just felt like it was automatic, regardless of contest, regardless of who was around him. And for me, that scoring value was enough. I did consider him at 6. I couldn't really get him at 5, but I did consider him at 6, which means I did consider him over Ginobili, but I did just value the more well-rounded skill set. But I think George Gervin falling ultimately in 7th is valid. I mean, I had him 7th, so obviously. But just, yeah, an amazing player, personally. I think if you haven't watched, go watch. I mean, it's a great watch.
I would have had Gervin above Reggie. 100%. I'm very high on what George Gervin could do in transition as a finisher, as a slasher. With his length, it just made it. I feel like his length made his like finishing ability much better around the rim. Yeah, I'm very high on his scoring. So my fault. My fault. He definitely would have made the list.
Yeah, so am I. I'm very high on his scoring, and like usually I'm lower on his archetype of guy, like just pure scores, nothing much else that he's adding to the game. I just don't think it's as damaging in his era that he's playing as it would be in realistically any other era, like beyond the like 80s and later. I just don't think it's as damaging. I feel like the offenses they ran and just it was just far more valuable to have that good of a score on the team. As Mar said, he's leading some of the best offenses in the league. If he played in a different era, yeah, he probably doesn't make the list. But for me, he's just so good of a scorer. I didn't feel anything else was damaging enough to leave him off. But yeah, if he was like a good playmaker or a good defender, like if he was a good defender, even just, yeah, I think he'd get up to 5 for me.
If George Gervin was a good defender, he'd be in my top 5 easily.
I would say I do want to go back and rewatch some more Spurs games because I do remember, like, I went off of my evaluation from a few years ago, and I had him graded out as like a drastically negative defensive player, and that's kind of the hang up where like I couldn't get him on my list because of that. Just offensively, I would have him above everybody we've talked about so far. So that was like where I really differed from you guys. So maybe there is some more value to what you said, getting in the passing lanes, contesting at the rim. And that would be my hang up. But I do think like I said, if you're a 2 guard and you're that good of a scorer, to me, I do hear you. Like the playmaking probably wasn't as valuable because in that era, they weren't really asking guys to like balance the scoring and playmaking like they were in later eras. And him being hyper efficient at what he did definitely mattered a lot. But I think it's the combination of like him not being like a super valuable creator and then also, in my opinion, being a drastically negative defensive player. To me, it's like those two things. It's really hard for me to get you above the guys that I have on my list who I view as like maybe average defenders, while also having these other superpowers. But like I said, Gervin could be as high as like 7 or 6 on my list, and I wouldn't be mad at that.
Yeah, I for sure hear you. Like, yeah, go ahead. I hear you for sure. Like skill set wise, I'm in agreement on a lot of that, but just when he's playing, the impact that he's having, yeah, that's the difference for me, I guess, in what we're valuing there.
Yeah, just a ridiculous player, and definitely well worth the watch if you want tapped in. I'm gonna recap where we've been so far because there is quite a big gap from George Gervin to our number 6. So in 20th place, we had a 3-way tie between Pete Maravich, Devin Booker, and Joe Dumars. In 18th place, we had Sam Jones and Mitch Richmond. In 17th place, we had David Thompson. In 15th place, we had Brandon Roy and Sidney Moncrief. In 14th place, we had Klay Thompson. In 12th place, we had Anthony Edwards and Vince Carter. In 11th place, we had Reggie Miller. In 10th place, we had Ray Allen. In 9th place, we had Manu Ginobili. In 8th place, we had Clyde Drexler. And in 7th place, we had George Gervin. And that is where we are currently.
I feel like somebody's about to get underrated here, but we're gonna.
Interesting. 24 might be coming up. Dobby Gray.
Okay.
Is pre-95 MJ a top 10 perimeter defender of all time, or top 20?
Probably.
Yeah, I don't have a list that goes that far.
Yeah.
It's always hard, like perimeter defender being like the word that's used there always makes it weird for me. Because then it's like, do you consider like Karolinko a perimeter defender? Like what, or like Bobby Jones? Like, are they perimeter defenders? It's like that's where it gets weird for me.
Out there, but I mean, he was a force. So, yeah, I don't know. You ask me guard defender, I'm probably I actually don't know. And then he asked, do you see MJ as an all defensive caliber player in 97 and 98? Second team.
Probably. Yeah. Definitely 97. 98 would be the year that I'm like, maybe.
98 MJ is a shaky year, but shout out to him though for what he did in Utah. So, able to maintain reputation and whatnot and win a championship. But
I just don't know why we're talking about Michael Jordan. We don't even know if he's going to be on this list.
I mean,
point.
Yeah, Manu's
damn showing better than 24.
Okay. I can see your list, by the way. Kai's says some of the Manu pushback is that if he had to take on the offensive load of these other guys, his flaws as an in-between scorer would be exposed more, and his defense more than likely falls off. And I think this is valid. That was my, I guess, concern is like if the minutes go up, do you still get the same relentless, frenetic Manu Ginobili that I think is driving the most value? And it's like it's the difference between per game value and per possession value. Manu Ginobili is like the king of per possession value, but Armand said it earlier. It's like per possession is great, but if someone's playing 7 more minutes than you, they can provide less value per possession, but still impact the game more than you. And that's like the hang up with Manu Ginobili for me. And then it is how much would the defense fall off if you scaled up his minutes? Would the scoring limitations and by that the lack of intermediate game hold him back from driving that same level of impact? Possibly, which is why I understand some downsides of Manu Ginobili. I just don't agree when the downside is he never averaged this many points. He's not as good as guys who did. Like that's why I disagree with it. It's not that I can't fathom guys not viewing Manu Ginobili the way I do. It's that I can't agree with the line of thinking that leads you to that conclusion.
What's funny, Mars, is like the version of Manu that like a lot of the people in the chat would view more highly of, we would probably both be like lower on. Like a version of Manu that isn't as energetic defensively, but is like volume scoring and averaging 8 or 9 assists per game on a playoff team and consistently rising in the playoffs is probably viewed more favorably than the Manu who played a role for 5 championships. It's really weird. He's a really weird player. Like I can't really fault anyone for being extremely high or extremely low on him. Because he's a unique case study. There's nothing quite like it.
Yeah, when some people say he's not a top 20 shooting guard of all time, that's when you lose me. But everyone has their opinions. Number 6, 102 points. So 20 more points than George Gervin. We are approaching close to he was on everybody's list. Now, he wasn't quite, but he was close to it. It actually might be quicker for me to just say who didn't have him on that list. Let me just go through it. Carson didn't have him on his list.
Okay. All right, I know who it is.
You know who it is. So you know who it is? Go ahead, spoil it.
It's Allen Iverson.
You are absolutely correct. Tyler did not have him on his list. And Tyler, you did not have him on the list. Us 3 all had him at 8. We all had him at 8. So we're all on the same page. But once again, we're just going to start with the person who didn't have him on their list. Tyler, talk to us.
Shout out my dog Carson, man. No, I freaking love AI, man. Growing up, he was like my hero. Like he was like my favorite. Him and Kobe were my 2 favorite players growing up. And I actually just rewatched that Game 7 against Milwaukee. That's why it was fresh in my mind with Ray Allen 2 days ago. But Iverson is one of the most polarizing players ever. He was my first cut. He was my number 11 guy. I originally had him 10th because I thought Vince Carter was considered a small forward. And then once Mars told me I could include Vince, I bumped AI.
Don't blame me for Allen Iverson.
Down to 11. So Mars switching Vince Carter's position on me bumped AI off the list. No, but I think Iverson is, again, I think we're going up another level in terms of offensive engine. I think Iverson is probably like the best offensive player now that we've talked about. The load that he could carry was absolutely absurd. He could dictate the entire offense he could navigate some of the worst possible circumstances you could possibly fathom and make something out of them. Like those Philly teams were consistently good, solid to good playoff offenses when they probably had no business being solid to good playoff offenses. And I don't at all question Allen Iverson's ability to raise the floor of a team as an offensive number 1. I think his ability to get to the rim, the fact that he led the league in free throw attempts damn near every single season, the fact that he took great care of the ball. Like he's averaging 3 or 4 turnovers, but that's while handling the ball 100 times a game. Like that, his teams were consistently great at taking care of the ball. And he consistently pops up as a guy who positively influenced his team's turnovers. Really good passer who maybe couldn't get taken advantage of fully because he didn't have weapons for most of his prime. And you do get like some seasons later on where he starts to get a few more shooters like 05, 06, or even like 08 with the Nuggets. And he really pops as like, those look like some of his most impactful offensive seasons. My only question with Iverson is his ability to scale his scoring and playmaking value onto teams that have legitimate championship aspirations. So like you look at the 01 Sixers and he's asked to basically do everything offensively for them. And there are very few guys in NBA history who historically can replicate what he was doing. And that obviously has its value. But with the way I evaluate talent, it's what can you do to push the ceiling of a championship team? And I think Iverson never being a good three-point shooter, never having like an efficient play finishing game, like his off-ball scoring was all like curling off of screens for long twos. And then also not being a positive defensive player. It's hard to think about what his impact looks like if he was on a team that has enough offensive talent to like actually contend for a championship. That's what's hard for me. Like, I value the ability to make a great team unbeatable more than make a bad team good. And I think Iverson falls more on the other side of the coin, where there are very few guys who can lift heavy weight in the way that he could, but everyone else on my list, I trust more to push the ceiling of a team that actually has a chance to compete. And I think a big part of that is like the Nuggets getting drastically better with Billups in place of Iverson the very next season.
That's
Yeah,
valid.
I mean, not a good defender. He got all defensive votes. What do you mean? No,
I found
He
out.
did,
I
dude.
found
In
out-
some of those
I
years, he
found
like
out-
gets
I
like
found
finishes
out
like fourth and
yesterday.
fifth in
Yeah,
defensive player of the year, and I was
Yeah,
like,
I
what?
found out. Was it today? It might have been today, or maybe last week. I don't know. I found out recently. Shout out to Real Talk. AI was like 6th in DPOY one time.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I did
I
not
don't know
know
what that was
that.
about. Yeah, I found that out a couple days ago. Shout out to Real Talk.
He's leading the league in steals, man. What do you mean?
Yeah, that's one thing that I've changed like my tune on a bit with Allen Iverson was like the defensive playmaking stuff. Because like, quite frankly, he couldn't guard. Respectfully, I mean, he was 5'11", 170, so like he was never really gonna guard. But like the turnovers he forced was valuable, and it was something I used to hate on because like he was gambling all the time. But then I just started. I was paying more attention. It's like the risk versus reward. The reward is he gets to steal, pick 6, 2 points, and then the trade-off is okay. He misses the gamble. They end up shooting at 18-footer.
They get funneled into Mutombo.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
gamble every time. Like, in my opinion, the 3 steals you're gonna get is more worth the long twos or the contested rim attempt by Dikembe they're gonna take. So, in my opinion, it's better for him to do that than be a bad defender who just does nothing. Like, so I don't think he actually bled as much value defensively as I once thought. Because the turnovers were valuable, and like the on-off stuff would like suggest that in some way. From 01 to 06, their defense was a 102.6 with AI and a 101 without him. Like, that's a negligible change. Now, once again, this was like before the time of like staggering to a high degree. So like AI played every minute of every game. So like, factor that in, like this is a very limited sample of him not on the court. It's why I had to go 5 years, because in order to find time for AI off the court, I have to factor in some of the time he was hurt in like the mid 2000s or 02 or whatever the year was, because when he's there, he's playing all the time. And then that's the other thing. It's like the Ginobili thing with Allen Iverson. It's like AI on a per possession basis maybe isn't as impactful as some of the other guys on this list, but he plays 49 minutes out of 48. So over the course of a game, he's driving so much impact because, quite frankly, on-offs don't matter when you're never off. Like, ever. If you're winning your minutes and you're Allen Iverson, that means you're going to win the game because all you do is play. And I do think that drove a lot of value individually. I do think some ways he was miscast as a player. I do think he was over-leveraged. I do think he could scale his game in different ways. I think his off-ball stuff was really valuable. I do think he was a really good passer. I think like the best example of that would probably be Game 7 against Toronto when they're just doubling him the whole game. I think he has like 20 assists in that game. And they win. Now, they won because Vince Carter missed that shot in the corner. But they won. And it was, I don't even know how many points AI scored. It might have been like 20.
I think he had like 28 points and 16 assists or something like
Oh,
that.
he's got 28. Shout out to AI, getting the volume even when you're getting doubled the whole game. I was here thinking you had like 20, but like it was a playmaking masterclass, and that was the thing. Like you spoke about, is like he didn't have weapons to capitalize on his gravity, and maybe his gravity was so high because he had no weapons. It might work in that way. It's like his gravity was amazing. but he had no one to capitalize on his gravity. But his gravity was only that amazing because he had no one to capitalize on his gravity. So which one is causing which? I don't know. But at the end of the day, he was a good passer. He struggled, obviously, like passing over length at times, but his handle was so good, he was able to navigate defenses. Good interior passer, found his teammates for spot up deep twos was the time. Just a really good offensive player. Do I think he was better offensively than George Gervin? I don't know. But he was amazing offensively. I don't think he bled as much value defensively as I once thought. And that's why he was my number 8. Just really, really good player.
He's another guy with like proof of concept. Sorry, it was like you brought up with Clyde Drexler playing off of Hakeem, and that was his most efficient season. Iverson's most efficient season was 08 Nuggets, and it makes you wonder, like, what does Iverson look like? Like, maybe he can't scale into more of an off-ball role, and maybe that's one of my hang-ups with him, just because he wasn't a good shooter and was a small guard. But like, in terms of like just giving him more space to operate, he could have been like and a very efficient version of the 30-point per game Iverson with more playmaking weapons. I just checked, by the way, it was 21 points and 16 assists, but it was 21 points and 27 field goal attempts. So it wasn't.
Hey man, we still empty the clip through double teams, man. That's another thing. We empty that clip. Yeah,
he did.
That's what we do.
Yeah, that's why I struggle with Iverson a little bit, and that's why I did actually think about Anthony Edwards over him. Like you guys said, he's a great floor raiser for a team. I really do think he bleeds a lot of value defensively, because while I see your point, Mars, that, you know, the gamble is worth it when they're taking those mid-range shots, part of the reason they're not going to the rim is because they have an elite rim protector there in Dikembe Mutombo. I don't know how valid that is as far as like if you're going to put him on another team that doesn't have that. I don't know how worth it those gambles are going to be. I think that's a lot more damaging in that sense. I do agree that he was miscast. I think he probably would have worked better if you put him into more of a point guard role. At the same time, though, if you move him to a point guard role, I don't know that he's like he's definitely one of the better playmakers on this list. I don't know if he's stacks up playmaking wise with the elite guys of the point guards. And if you keep him as shooting guard, I just don't think you can really move him onto many other teams, because there's a limitation as far as the point guard you can pair with him. You can't put him with a small point guard that doesn't defend, who might be this like elite playmaker. Like you definitely can't pair him with like a Steve Nash or anything like that. You can't pair him with somebody that's better with the ball in their hands. You know, it needs to be this off-ball, larger defensive guy, or you need to put him at point guard. So that's kind of why I struggle with Iverson, but I do think he's one of the like elite scorers, elite offensive players that, I mean, obviously his efficiency is rough, but you know, that's some of the teams that he was playing with. So I would be interested to see like if he, not even if he was secondary to another like great offensive player, but even if he just had more competent offensive pieces during his prime, I'd be really interested to see like what it would have looked like. So yeah, that's why I give him the grace to be at number 8. But yeah, I did give Anthony Edwards some consideration.
Do you guys think? Because I think AI could have been a point guard, and I think
I agree. I think the optimal situation for Iverson would have been like imagine just Iverson being Tony Parker for the Spurs.
Okay,
like that's
what I was going to say.
His role. But like that's the role you could envision Iverson playing, where he's like a spot slasher who can break down the defense when they need him to, but he's still playing within a system that's built around Duncan's post-up game. And then you get a version of Iverson in place of Parker, who is going to generate a ton of turnovers, and then he missed the steal. David Robinson and Tim Duncan are behind him. Like you're chilling. I think that would be the optimal version of like an Iverson roster build, where he's the clear offensive number 1.
Yeah, I agree.
was going to say exactly that. So, great.
My bad, Mars. My bad.
It's cool. No one will ever know. No one will ever believe me either. So, it's cool.
I believe you. That's what matters. I believe you, man.
Yay. On to number 5. There was actually quite another big gap. So Iverson had 102. This guy had 134. So 32 more points than Allen Iverson, which was interesting to say the least, but is what it is. let's see, was he on everyone's list? He might be the first one. Let's see. No, he was not. He was close, but he was not.
Who had him off the
Okay.
list?
Yeah, who had him?
Chill and ZZ.
Damn, chill. Damn.
I knew
Chill-
someone.
Yeah,
having Sam Jones is going to keep him off.
Chill is a notorious hater of this guy. ZZ, I'm not even going to ask what he was thinking. Those are the only two. I think all of us, no, Armand, you had him sixth. The rest of us had him in fifth. This is, yeah, so he came where we put him. This is Tracy McGrady. I'll start because this is my favorite player ever.
There you go.
Yeah. Tracy McGrady is just amazing. I don't know what to tell people. I went with 02 and 03. 03 being the absolute peak, 02 just because I wanted to do more than 1 year. He was everything you'd want in a two guards. He got offensive rebounds. He was an amazing passer. He could protect the rim. He could make jump shots from three or from the mid range. He could get to the rim. He could get to the free throw line. Could play out the post. Could play on the ball. Could play off the ball. Could drive your offense. Could play off of other people. Unfortunately, Orlando didn't have anyone, but could play off of other people. There wasn't really any holes in his game, and particularly in 03, it was like as close to the perfect offensive two guards without being Michael Jordan as possible. Like, he carried an offense. He didn't turn the ball over a lot. He created a bunch for his teammates. He scored at ridiculous volume. His mid-range was elite. The three-point, I think he shot like 38% from three that year, maybe 37, 30, something good from three on high volume. Got to the free throw line, got that Orlando team to the playoffs. Obviously, they ended up blowing a 3-1 lead to Detroit. But he was just, I don't know what flaws, especially offensively, you look at Tracy McGrady as having. The only flaw I could outline for him would be that he often settled for that pull-up mid-range a bit too much. When like he would have driving lanes, but he was just so comfortable shooting that hezzy pool that it could dent some of his efficiency. But even then, I still think he was efficient. I don't know what, maybe like +3, I think. But just the scoring versatility plus the playmaking at 6'9", it kind of just was a cheat code. The only reason I don't have him higher is because after 03, 04, you start seeing like the notable decline once you get to Houston, especially offensively with the burst and whatnot. And he just isn't really the same player anymore. So the longevity of his peak isn't great. But like if he gave me 3 years at 03 levels, maybe I would have had him higher. That's how good I think Tracy McGrady was. But I settled on 5th place. Just, good player.
I definitely agree. I do think Tracy McGrady is one of the more underrated peaks that we talk about because in that 2 to 3 year span, I think he was one of the better offensive engines at this position. With you talk about like the shot making, the athleticism, the passing, what he gave to you on defense as well. The reason I put him at 5 is just because I don't think he's the level of offensive engine my other 4 are. So it's like, I think when we get to the top 4, like there's a threshold there where it's like he's just right outside of it. But I do hold value to what he was doing throughout those years. It's just, and plus I think I have like minimum 4 years for everybody else to where T-Mac only have like 2 to 3. So that was really my difference between him and the other 4 ahead of him.
McGrady was the guy I was thinking about when I said I'm doing single season peaks, but also I want to see proof of concept over multiple years. And McGrady to me has this weird thing happening where 03, he randomly is like the best 3-point shooter in the league. And then never was close to that again. He was 36% in 02, 35.5% 01, jumps up to 38.6% on extreme volume in 03. And then the next season is 34, 33, 31, 33% from 3. And it's like, what the heck happened in 03 to make him a 39% volume 3-point shooter? And I do think that like carried a lot of weight in his ability to like ramp up to 32 points per game on plus 4.5% efficiency, which is absolutely absurd. But the thing with T-Mac is I I think like I kind of dock him a little bit in my head for single season peaks, like because I do think a lot of that is just variance over a single season sample. And 3-point shooting is one of those things that you kind of need multiple years of. Very good playoff scorer. I think he gets underrated because he didn't get out of the first round. In that regard, the thing for me is I don't really know what to make of T-Mac's rim pressure. Like I do think he's a guy who you look at and you like question why he's settling a lot. But at the same time, he had to navigate some of the most extreme offensive circumstances ever. Like the Magic from 01 to 03 were absolutely starved of any semblance of offensive talent. And I do wonder if we get a different version of T-Mac as a slasher, if they were better at creating space and giving him more offensive talent. But I do think Tracy McGrady, as just a pure offensive engine, Mars hit the nail on the head. Like I think the passing especially is the most underrated thing with T-Mac. He was an absolutely unbelievable passer. The pull-up jumper was filthy. The hezzy pull was absolutely filthy. Could be a force in transition. And the most important thing, not a defensive liability. With all of that, like, make what you will of his defense. I think there are strong positives and strong negatives. But at the end of the day, you never looked at T-Mac and thought he was a liability on the court while carrying so much offensive responsibility. So to me, that's why I cut Manu off at 6. I was like, the top 5 to me are like the solidified. These are like monster offensive engines. And I do think T-Mac's in that class.
Yeah, I had him at 6, but if you give me that like 03 season, like Mars said, for 3 years rather than, because I kept it to a 3-year window. So I did, I think 01 to 03. If you give me 3 of those seasons, I mean, he's definitely in the top 5. I think 4, maybe 3. I'd think about 3. I would think about it. Like he is just truly that good that season. And you mentioned the blowing the 3-1 lead. I don't even hold that against him because realistically, it was a miracle that they were up 3-1 in the first place against that Pistons team. So that, to me, the fact that they were up 3-1 in the first place is just a testament to him.
Okay, because the same thing's going to be said a couple names away.
Okay, yeah, and I know exactly what you're talking about.
You mean next name, but sure.
Oh, here.
Carry on.
Here we go. And I do agree that, like, impact-wise defensively, it might not be there, but the fact that he's having to do everything offensively for this team, I do think if you put him like in a better situation, not even like great situation, just marginally better situation where you have any capable offensive players around him, he's, what is he, 6'8", 6'9"? Like, he's without a doubt capable defensively. I don't think at any point he's a liability. He's very capable, and I think he could have been a plus in a better situation during those years. But yeah, the 3-point shooting that he's given me, just the pull-up shooting and the threat that he is at the rim, truly a 3-level scorer, and also one of the most entertaining players the league has ever seen, in my opinion. So,
very true.
He's a good player, man. Shout out to Tracy McGrady. Series like this is where I would hope guys like Tracy McGrady would get their respects, because obviously on the all-time scale, the longevity wasn't great, and obviously, you know, accolades or never got first round, whatever. But on a peak list, just everyone at their best, seeing Tracy McGrady in the top 5, it warms my heart. With that being said, he was 41 points behind 4th place. So, you know, he was a very distant 5th. He was on his own island. No one was near him. AI was 30 points behind him, and 4th was 40 points above him. He was just by himself.
Did anyone give him above a 5th place vote?
The highest anyone had him, I believe, was 4th. No. Shout out to my good friend Ox. Had him at number 2. Shout out to him.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay.
Shout out to him.
Okay,
All right,
brother. All right.
Ron had him at 3. Real Talk had him at 4. Penn had him at 4. Those are the highest.
Did anybody have him off the list?
Yeah, Chill and
oh yeah, you said that. Yeah, you said that.
Chill and Easy. Yeah, I would listen to second more than I would listen to not top 10. By the way, so
I can understand
that way.
I can understand.
Yeah.
I personally wouldn't, but I understand it.
Yes, you would. You would listen to him over him before you would listen to him below Joe Dumas.
Okay. Oh, you know what? You're right. You acting like you know me or something.
I mean, 4th place with 100 and how many points did I say? 175 points. So very big gap. Now you would think we'd finally be at this point where everyone has him on the list. You would be wrong. You would be wrong. He is still not on everybody's list.
Oh my goodness.
Shout out to friends of the show, Ox. He is not top 10.
Okay.
He was the only one who did not have him on the list. But shout out to him. Now, I will say, ultimately, his lack of inclusion on Ox's list didn't change his ranking. He wasn't going to be higher. But shout out to Ox.
Okay.
All of us up here had him fourth. I believe the highest anyone had him was third. So he got no votes higher than third. Once again, one person had him in off the list. But most people had him fourth, a couple thirds. Gifted, Will, KB, Joel, Brad, and Damien all had him third, but mainly fourth. I think everyone knows who we're talking about at this point. It is James Harden. He is someone who I got a lot of people putting him on the point guard list, which I think is like where I kind of want to start. He is the definition of a combo guard. And I think that term gets thrown around a lot. There's not many people who I think fit that bill. James Harden is one of them. He is a combo guard. He could play the point. He could play the two. He could play both of them at an elite level. Not many people can do that. Some people just get the ball put in their hands because they can score combo guards. I don't think that's what it is. I think James Harden was a combo guard. I think at his best, he is probably the best isolation scorer we've ever seen. I mean, just that combination of volume and efficiency is unmatched. I mean, obviously that 2019 season, it was 16 points per game in isolation. For anyone wondering, that's what Manu Ginobili averaged. James Harden was doing that in isolation. You know what I'm saying? But just tremendous playmaker, amazing out of pick and roll. The lob was elite. The ability to he mastered pick and roll around 2017. And this is what I always find cool about James Harden, because the development arc of him was obviously like the OKC times. He was asked to defend more, be that connector, be someone who could be a scoring punch, but do a lot of the little things and just bridge things together and then carry the loads when KD or Russ were off the court. Then he goes to Houston and is given like this large offensive burden on limited teams, and he's able to do that, and he's a tremendous scorer, generates free throws like he did in OKC, but just higher volume, a lot of mid-range jump shots, pull-up threes, all of that good stuff. And then D'Antoni comes along, and it's, okay, you're the point guard now, spread pick and roll, you and Capella are the foundation of this offense, shooters around you, just manipulate the game, top three offense, masterful in pick and roll. And then the league comes together and is like, okay, James Harden is killing us in pick and roll. Let's start switching. And then James Harden decides to become the best isolation scorer we've ever seen. And then from 18, 19, 20, 21, you literally can't stop him in isolation while he's a pick and roll maestro. It's just some of the greatest regular season stretches we've ever seen. Now, the issues I have, his gameplay, his style of play was very rigid. And my issues with him lie as you progress and you see the same opponent multiple times, you kind of knew what was going to happen. And as that happened, and if his three-point shot wasn't falling, which unfortunately during his peak in the playoffs, more often than not, it didn't. You end up with someone who's turnover prone, can be forced into bad decisions. You can kind of dictate what he's going to do on any given possession. And that does dent his value enough to where I have him at fourth. Not enough to where I leave him off the list or enough to where I have him outside the top five or whatever. But that does dent his value enough to where I would have him in fourth, despite what I would deem to be the second or third highest regular season peak hit. Just a few limitations with his game in terms of the rigidity is why he left a little bit to be desired. But just an amazing player. Also defensively, I don't think post the years I have, 19 to 21, you could throw 18 in there as well. I don't think he was as bad defensively as people said. Like I don't think he was at all. I think he was still living off the negative reputation he cultivated from years prior. I don't think he was a good defender, but I don't think he was as bad as people said. But yeah, those are my strengths and weaknesses with James Harden. But yeah, 4th is fine for me.
I think once again, when we get into our level of offensive engines, I think James Harden is towards the top of that list across any position, not just the shooting guard, especially during the regular season. Once again, like you hit the nail on the head when we talk about regular season play versus postseason play, because you have such a stable formula in the regular season where I can kill you in isolation. I can make any read out of pick and roll. I'm one of the most deadly step back off the dribble 3-point shooters in the league, or maybe even in league history. That's something that tends well to the regular season. So you're going to get a lot of high offensive ratings from the Houston Rockets. You're going to get top of the Western Conference years from the Houston Rockets. You're going to get your 36 points per game. We talked about last episode where Luka is one of the only guards to lead the league in 3-point attempts and free throw attempts in a single season. Mars, I believe you said James Harden was the other guard. Is that still
2019?
Okay.
Yeah,
exactly. Because the free throw drawing, the isolation scoring, the first step, the ability to get within the teeth of the defense and make any read, whether it's the lob pass, whether it's the lay down pass, whether it's the skip pass, there's truly nothing you can do for that throughout the regular season. This is the thing, though. Mars, I think you laid this out perfectly. And there's also a certain fellow in Oklahoma City who's walking into this territory. Not being able to throw a counter at a defense when it's like, okay, the pick and roll's not working. The isolation isn't working today. How can I affect this playoff series as a scorer when my shot's not falling? When I can't get to the spots I want to consistently? And that's some of the issues that I had with Harden throughout these years. Just because I don't think the three guys ahead of him had that issue as much. I think all of those guys were versatile enough to where, hey, if you guys have an answer for this, okay, cool, I got this. You guys have an answer for this, okay, cool, I have this. But I'll get into that bag in a second. James Harden, number 4, very very, very well respected on this list. I just couldn't have him any higher.
One of the things you said about they have an answer for this and then I can do this. I think an important thing to keep in mind is the 3 guys we're going to have ahead of them, there were things that there was no answer for. You couldn't take away their superpower. Like I feel like you could with Harden at times, and I completely agree with the rigidity. And if you are going to be an extreme on-ball player, you basically have to be flawless for it to work throughout a deep playoff run. And Harden wasn't flawless. So those flaws start to get highlighted as, like Mars said, you see the same defenses over and over and over again. And I do think there was a level of not just rigidity with Harden's game, but a rigidity to the scheme where it's like defenses could choose where to funnel the ball. Like Game 7, Golden State, they could choose to make all of Houston's shot attempts spot up threes, or Harden taking a really difficult step back 3, as opposed to diversifying the approach and forcing the defense to then adjust what you want to what you want to do. And I do think a big staple of why that applies so much to Harden is you look at his series by series numbers. He's one of the very few all-time great offensive engines whose numbers consistently get worse the longer the series goes. Harden always peaked the first 4 games of a series, where it's the reverse LeBron, where LeBron has the feel it out games 1 through 3. And then by game 7, he has figured out your defense and is going to destroy you. Whereas Harden is the inverse.
Mm-hmm. That was my main excuse back in 2020. Hey, fill out game. We don't even worry about it.
Yeah. It's we're going to be good. Game 2 is going to come back with a 49-point triple-double. We're chilling. But Harden is the inverse of that, where he kills you with his formula, games 1, 2, and 3. But the longer you get into the series, the more it drags out, the more you get into a game 6, game 7. That's when you start to get those tour date type shooting performances where he doesn't feel like the all-time great offensive engine he once was. With that said, though, I don't like the idea of Harden not being viewed as a great playoff player because he gets held to his own standard. The standard he set in the regular season, the bar was so high that him in the playoffs still being an efficient 30-point per game scorer is viewed as a negative thing. And that still is a level above anyone else we've talked about. Harden was still I think in a different class of offensive engine than anyone we've talked about. The combination of on-ball scoring and playmaking was just absurd. But like you guys both touched on, the top 3 guys either had superpowers that were scheme-proof or had ways to figure out different types of things while also adding value defensively, which Harden didn't do. So in order for Harden to get to top 3, I think he would have had to have been basically a perfect on-ball player. And there hasn't been one except for maybe Mr. Steve.
Yeah, I think it's important because with all of this being said, in 2019 and 2020 and 21, that was a one series sample because he got hurt in game 1 against the Bucks. James Harden to me was still a top 5 playoff performer, in and around it at least. It just so happened that in the regular seasons, he was top 1, 2, or 3. So him dropping from that standard does mean he's a playoff dropper, and that's one thing I've always said. James Harden is a playoff dropper. He undeniably gets worse in the postseason. But the connotation that has for so many people is player A, playoff dropper, player B, playoff riser, player B is better than player A. That's just not the case in all situations. You can ride. Reggie Miller's a playoff riser. James Harden is not. James Harden is better than Reggie Miller, regardless of the fact that Reggie Miller's a playoff riser. Okay. Like it just because you're dropping from a ridiculous height doesn't mean you aren't still landing somewhere higher than someone who's got a jetpack. Like, you know what I'm saying? So still a really good playoff performer. And I'll die on the hill. In 2019, them losing to Golden State, if he wasn't the best player in the series because Kevin Durant, he was the second best player in the series. He just happened to lose. And that happens sometimes. In 2018, they lost to the best team ever. And I think James Harden actually kind of struggled in that series. Funny because that was his MVP year. And that was probably the worst playoff run he had in like his prime years or whatever the case may be. But he wasn't as bad in the playoffs as people say. That's my hot take, I guess. But ultimately, just it's funny because I think the rigidity is a problem, but I don't question James Harden's scalability. It's like he's gonna play James Harden's way, but he can scale it in a way of like, depending on who's around him, which version of James Harden's way are you gonna get? Like it's gonna be James Harden ball dominance and asking him to lead your offense, but he can do it by scaling down the scoring and leaning more into the playmaking when he's next to a guy like Joel Embiid or a scoring wing like Kawhi. But then if you burden him with scoring, he can now do that while being the most high volume elite isolationist in the league and give you high volume scoring. But it's all going to come in the James Harden way. So limited versatility, but high tier scalability. And there's not many people I think that's true for off the top of my head. So shout out to James Harden.
Yeah, that's rare. I think he has an argument if we're just talking regular season for being 3 for me, but the heliocentric nature of him, even in situations like you were talking about where you pair him with different players where he can be more of this score focused or this playmaking focused guy, that adds a ton of value for me for sure. But the heliocentric nature of his game when we get to the playoffs, like you guys said, outside of really 1 year where I do think like 2019, he's a really good playoff player that year. Outside of that, the 3-point shooting is really like that dropping off for me at the volume that he's still taking. It's more damaging than like I guess the numbers say, just because he's so heavily relied on, and that's the way that he's played. So the team really goes as James Harden goes. And so even if like those early games in the series, he is really good. Like he's really good in those early games in the series. When I know I got to rely on you in game 5, 6, and 7, I can't have you dropping off all that much at all. So, but yeah, I think he's an easy 4. We're like, it sounds like we're hating on Harden, but it's just like nitpicking to make the case for, other guys above.
Once you get this high, you kind of spend more time explaining why they're not higher as opposed to why they're above. Like, remember, this means James Harden is above everyone except 3. So like, and we all had him 4 up here. So like, we are high on James Harden. Just there's 3 others. Before we get into the top 3, I think you guys know who it is, but we do have a couple of super chats. W. Greg said, so playoff games that they won, with 50% of the team's points. AI, MJ, and Micah. Jalen Brunson was close to that, right?
I actually don't know, but all this means to me is that Mike
Yeah,
can
45
be the top
of
of my
95.
45 out of 94, right? Brunson?
Something
Mhm.
like that. Yeah, something like that. So
Yeah.
he was close. Dobby Greg said, is there anyone not in your list that makes it if it's 1 year? So I guess this is for Armand, myself, John D, because Tyler did 1 year. Vince probably would have made it if it was 1 year. I think 01 Vince was a tremendous year. So he probably would have been one who would have made it for me.
I don't know if there's any one that would have made it if it was just 1 year. I think guys just would have been higher had it just been 1 year. Like McGrady, if it was just 1 year, is a little higher. If it's Carter, I think he's a touch higher. But I gave like precedence to those like super high years, and that's why Carter got on my list in the first place. So
JSB 0712 said donating to whoever needs to get their smoke detector battery replaced. Yeah, nice, good one. Hoping
care
my
of that
favorite
for you.
player does not get snubbed from his well-deserved number 2 spot. We'll see, because we are moving on to number 3 now. This guy had 195 points, so 20 more points than James Harden. Remember, this is out of a possible 260. Now, you'd think this would be where everyone has them on the list. However, no, I'm joking. Everyone had him on the list,
right.
but he wasn't in everyone's top 5, which was still kind of surprising. He was basically in everyone's top 5, but there was one person who had him in 7th. Wow! Shout out to our good friend Pirate, had him in 7th. This is Dwayne Wade. We all up here had him in 3rd. So, spoiler alert. We have the exact same top 3 up here. Talk to us about Dwayne Wade. Yeah, talk to us about Dwayne Wade.
I don't know if we all do. I mean, there's still 2 names.
I mean, I do know. I mean, I'm just gonna spoil it now. We have
okay, all right.
Yeah,
I'm trying to preserve the content here. Yeah, I mean, Dwayne Wade. I mean, just the fact that I did the 3-year peak really does do him a disservice in a way, even though he's still 3rd for me. But the fact that I can't include his 06 playoff run because I got to get the 09 regular season in there is truly a disservice to him. But he still makes it 3rd anyways. I mean, the rim pressure that he adds as this athletic guard, also I think underrated like defensively as well. One of my favorite players to watch, and especially that 09 season, has an argument for the best scorer in the league, even though, you have guys in the league at the time that are, rivaling all-time guys. I know there's going to be one guy that's higher up on this list that's in the league at the same time, and Dwayne Wade is legitimately in that conversation with him for good reason, I think. And also an underrated playmaker. I think that kind of gets forgotten in a conversation when it comes to James Harden versus him, because Harden is a better playmaker than him. But I do think Wade is underrated in that way.
Penn had him 2nd. He wanted me to announce that. Penn was the only one who had him 2nd. Everyone else had him 3rd.
Okay.
I
have a lot of
I think it's more Kobe hate than D Wade problem, but it is what it is. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. I mean, knowing Penn, maybe I could lean to that being the case. But for me, I'll say I heavily consider D Wade at number 2. Heavily considered.
I did as well.
I think he's just amazing. Tremendous 2-way player. One of the best rim protecting guards we've ever seen. Tremendous in the passing lanes. Really good man defender. Even at his peak, which I had as 09 to 2011, because I was doing multi-years as well. A really, really good man defender. 2011, you see like him having to like develop like that off-ball game even more as a cutter, crashing the offensive glass. Like he did a lot of like the possession maxing stuff. Even in 09, when he is their primary ball handler, decision maker, running pick and roll, one of the best downhill players we've ever seen. His ability to get 2 feet in the paint is borderline unrivaled. The floater is amazing. Obviously, the free throw rate, the ability to draw fouls on his mid-range jump shot, which wasn't like the most efficient shot when he took it, but because he was able to still draw fouls on it, was still able to generate like high level efficiency on his outside shot. I agree with Armand. The playmaking is underrated. Just a really, really good pick and roll playmaker. really good feel for lay down and interior passes. Just a very well-rounded offensive player who has a superpower that you can't really do anything about. You can't keep D-Wade out of the paint. And anytime you're able to collapse the defense as consistently as he was, and then draw fouls and finish and floaters and then kick out for your teammates, that's the recipe for a tremendous offensive player who's also providing a ton of value on defense. Yeah, I mean, yeah, like that's it. He could be second for me. He wasn't, but he could be. That's how good he was.
Yeah, I also considered Dwayne Wade for second place, and that's not like being low on Kobe. That's just being extremely high on Dwayne Wade. D Wade, I think specifically like the 2 years from 2009 and 2010, one of the freakiest athletes to ever step foot on a basketball court. Like all of the things we praise with Shea, in terms of like flexibility, balance, coordination, like crazy shin angles, and like dragging his knee across the court while pulling back. Dwayne Wade had that, but then he also had like the Michael Jordan first step. And that combination of balance, fluidity, coordination, and explosive athleticism was like, you couldn't do anything about it. Like, teams tried in the playoffs to scheme for that. Like Boston tried in, I believe it was the 2010 first round, and he just dissected them. Atlanta tried in 2009 first round. 2006, you get like the Bulls, the Nets, and the Pistons all trying. The Mavs seem to have him figured out in games 1 and 2. Then the remainder of the series averages like 10 shots at the rim per game and 20 free throws. 2005, same thing. A sophomore Dwayne Wade absolutely picks apart the Pistons. Just getting 2 feet in the paint quite literally whenever he wanted. To me, the most impressive part about all of this is like, yes, he gets 2 feet in the paint at will. Yes, he gets to the free throw line at a higher rate than basically any guard in NBA history. Yes, he pushes the pace and creates a lot of easy opportunities in transition. He was also sneaky, like at this time, one of the best interior passers of the century. Like from the paint to the paint passes, laying it down to Shaq or Alonzo Mourning or whatever junk bigs they had later in his peak. His ability to create his own shots at the rim and then also create shots at the rim for his teammates was like such a unique combination that boosted his team's scoring at the rim in a way you only see with like a Russell Westbrook, really comparatively. But Dwayne Wade was just a league's better finisher at the rim than Russell Westbrook. Like he was a legit touch finisher with variety. And then he had the mid-range game to kind of like fall back on as a counter. The mid-range game wasn't great, but it was a nice little counter for if he needed to keep like accessing scoring points and pressure points while defenses were overpacking the paint. And then of course the defensive stuff is just absurd. His ability to generate turnovers, his ability to make plays at the rim. You get these high leverage moments where he'll make like 4 defensive player of the year level plays in like units, like back to back to close a game. And you're just like, am I watching Michael Jordan right now? Dwayne Wade was an absurd player, absurd motor guy, absurdly skilled, and you just couldn't do anything about his superpower. He never had to adjust his game because there was like, you could not take away what he wanted to do. And I think that made him very like playoff proof. Even just like the moment he stepped in the league, he was playoff proof. And I think the only thing is like the jumper, man. Like if he was just a little bit better of a jump shooter, we'd be talking about like a Mount Rushmore offensive candidate, in my opinion. But like, because he wasn't a good jump shooter, that's like the one thing, like that limits some of his off-ball value. Like there were times, I mean, obviously this is past the peak, but like I said, I like proof of concept. Like 2013 finals, you got to like, are we going to close with Mike Miller or Dwayne Wade? Because like you want the extra shooter on the court. And I think that like is a real concern with Dwayne Wade that you don't get with some of these other gargantuan shooting guards. But the other stuff, the on-ball slashing and the defensive presence, it's just like he was damn near a flawless two-way player. And his presence was felt no matter what you tried to do.
John D just want to move on to number 2. I see what you're
Much respect to Dwayne,
dude, he's been licking his lip for like the last 15 minutes.
Yeah, so you know what? Let's talk about Dwayne Wade a little bit more. We just gonna wait for John D to crash out.
Do your thing.
And disconnect.
Listen. Before we much respect to Wade. I mean, my Chicago brother, but like I said, much respect. One of 09, one of the best seasons of the 2000s.
You didn't consider Wade higher than 3, like for you is clear cut?
I could understand. Now I'm gonna be completely honest. Like, I'm not gonna be one of those guys that walks around with no bias. Like, I have a bias and it's pretty clear. But like, I can understand you having Wade higher than Kobe. But I want to hear the argument first. I want to hear the argument. So when we talk about Kobe playing next to Shaq, when Kobe didn't peak next to Shaq in a peak argument.
For what it's worth, because I think Penn said that. We're talking about, I think Penn said, there we go. He disconnected the moment he started talking about, oh, there he's back. I think Penn said that in the chat. Penn had Kobe's peak as 02 to 06, which means he included Shaq years, for what it's worth.
I don't think that's when he peaked, but it's like I said.
The thing is, because I think 03, if you're doing single season like peaks for Kobe, I think I would hear the argument for 03. I would hear it. But once you start extending it out, the surrounding years from 03 are just a bit,
including 04 and 05 is really weird. Those are like clearly his 2 worst prime seasons.
Yeah, that's why it gets tough for me with Kobe's peak, because 04 and 05 just kind of like, if his stretch was 03, 06, 07, 08, 09.
Yeah.
But 04 and 05 is his 2015 LeBron. It's just ugh. It's just, why are you there? Mm-hmm. So but I would, once again, I consider D Wade, it's the superpower thing. He just had one trait that like I value a lot, is the rim pressure, the paint touches, the like persistency. And then on top of that, I do think he balanced the offensive defensive combination better. So like those would be the reasons why I would consider a D Wade above Kobe. But ultimately I settled with him at 3 because there were just some limitations to like his scoring diversity. And I do think I'm nitpicking, really. Like, I'm not convinced either way. I am just nitpicking. But I do think we can move on to number 2. Because I know John D's connection might not even survive. Number 2 had 232 points out of a possible 260. I think we know who it is. Everyone had him on the list. Spoiler. I do think it's relevant to say not everyone had him top 2. Penn had him in 3rd. Ox had him in 3rd. No one had him below 3 though. So 3 was the lowest. He was 3 on 2 lists. I'm not going to reveal if anyone had him number 1 or not. We'll save that. But he was 3 on 2 lists, 2 on everyone else. John D, the floor is yours.
Mr. Bean, I just want to say, all right, like real shit though, I think some of the Kobe stuff is overblown. And number 1, I want to talk about efficiency. Let's talk about efficiency, ladies and gentlemen, because through my 4 or 5 season peak I have for Kobe Bryant, I have 06 to 2010. Throughout those years, he gave you 29.8 points per game, 6 rebounds and 5 assists. Across the postseason, he gave you 29.8 points per game, 6 rebounds and 5 assists. Why is that? Why do you think he can post the exact same stat line through a 5-year peak from regular season to postseason? It's because he had counters, ladies and gentlemen. Isolation, post game, pick and roll, off ball. He could kill you however he wanted. In 2006, that Laker team was trashed. 92 offensive rating with him off the floor. And when he's on the court, he's replicating a top 3 offensive basketball as a scorer. People, and this is where I talk about scoring being underrated in basketball. We've gotten to a point in basketball where there's so much stats, there's so much spreadsheets, there's so much numbers that the simple shit gets underrated. Putting the ball in the basket gets underrated, ladies and gentlemen. When you can do that at a top 5 level the league has ever seen, you're going to translate top tier offense. That's what's going to happen. If you can score at that level, you're going to create top tier offense. So I want to go back because I want to rewatch this series. 2010 Western Conference Finals against the Phoenix Suns. Kobe Bryant gives you 33 points per game, 7 rebounds, and 8 assists on a +10 true shooting. He fried the Jazz the series before. Like, we're not going to sit here and disrespect Kobe Bryant like he's not one of the greatest regular season and postseason scorers the league has ever seen. If you want to take away the pick and roll, okay, I'm still one of the better off-ball players in the league. If you want to take away the off-ball play, I'm still one of the best post-up guards the league has ever seen. So yeah, we may talk about Kobe Bryant not having that A+ trait, LeBron athleticism, a Wade athleticism, a Michael Jordan first step, but he had every single counter he could give at you to where I'm going to get mine off through this 4 or 5 year stretch.
Yeah, I think the name of Kobe's game, like if you had to boil it down to 2 words, it would be versatility and resilience. I think those would be the 2 words. And I hate when versatility is boiled down to, can you score from all 3 levels? Like, I think there's so much more to it. It's how many play types can you be effective in? How many different ways can you get your shot off? Are you able to shoot right shoulder, left shoulder? Are you able to shoot off a hop, off a 1-2, left, right, left? Are you able to change the arc of your shot depending on contest? Are you able to, if a team is guarding the pick and roll in a certain way, are you able to adjust and now maybe you're beating them in the post? Or maybe you don't need the screen and now you're beating them in isolation. Like, versatility is all good and well because out of pick and roll, you can shoot the pull-up 3 against drop, and then you can attack when they hedge and you can get around it and get to the rim. Cool, 3-level scoring. But what about, can you beat a coverage in so many different ways that the coverage is actually just a waste of time? Can you do that? That's what Kobe Bryant could do. And it's not going to manifest itself in +12 true shooting. It's not going to manifest itself like against the Suns when they had no answer, so they had to go zone. And he's just torching that zone with pull-ups, jump shots that for everyone else it's a terrible shot, but for him, he's just making it on commands. Like, cool. But on a consistent basis, yeah, he's going to hover around +3, +4, +2, whatever the case may be. But one thing that was pretty much guaranteed was whatever your defense threw at him, he had an answer for it. And sure, there'll be some series where like the pull-up mid-range wasn't falling for him, so like it could dent his efficiency even more. But it wasn't due to not having an answer for the coverage. Now, sometimes you could force him into the answer being the tough shots, which I do think was a weakness because, once again, like a guy like Dwayne Wade's, just get to the rim. Kobe didn't have that same luxury, so he had to beat those coverages with the counters. But when that resilience is on display year after year after year after year, through gauntlet playoff runs in the regular season, like, oh wait, they were like the number 1 seed before Pau Gasol gets there. And that roster, respectfully, had no business being the number 1 seed. But they were. In 2010, what is it, 7 game winners? And the gap between the 1st and 8th seed was 7 games. Like, just one of the more reliable clutch scorers. The defense, I think 06 and 07, yeah. 08, nice. Like the defense in 08. 09, nice. 2010, yeah. But still, like, when it's time, money time, or whatever the case may be, you know, the defense is still like, he's not someone who you can just pick on the island. He might not give you that possession to possession value, but still, I would probably call him a positive on that end of the ball. And yeah, he is just one of the best offensive players ever. Now, it might not match up on like whatever spreadsheet you're using, but watch him play. I don't know what to tell you. Watch him play. That's one of the best offensive players you'll ever see. And that's why I had a number 2.
I don't.
Despite not having, despite not having that S-tier superpower that some other people may have. When you have that many A-tier traits, and you can combine them and use them in any given situation and beat teams, because that's what you need in the playoffs. Not every team is going to defend you the same way. Not every team has the same personnel. So do you have counters for X team, but then you're going to need different ones for Y team because of what they can throw at you? And then you're going to have to face Z team over here, but you have counters for that team because their personnel is different. That was what Kobe Bryant was. And that's why he was tailor-made for these deep postseason runs, is because every team threw something different at him, but he always had the answers to the test. And I think that's what made him special, and that's why he was my number 2. So,
and that's what to me really separated. And look, no one's going to take it seriously because I have the poster behind me, so they're going to think I'm biased. But that's why I didn't really consider Wade above him, is just the amount of ways that he can attack you, the way he's going to be unstoppable no matter what you throw at him. And I also think that he impacts the game even in those series where he's having rough shooting stretches, when he's forced into those tougher shots, and maybe they're not falling, right? He's still, again, people are going to hate this because they call him a ball hog. He's an underrated playmaker. He's actually a plus playmaker.
You don't have to.
Yeah. So
Facts.
yeah. So that, along with the fact that it's just so hard to stop him from scoring the ball. You brought up the series against the Suns, and that plus, what was it? Plus 10, plus 12?
I believe it was like plus 10.
Yeah. The plus 10, like, that's an insane outlier, but at the same time, that's like one of the only bad defenses that he ever gets to play against in his entire playoff career is that team. So yeah, it's an outlier because it's a bad defense, but also he's going up against like juggernaut defenses for his entire career, basically, especially in his prime. Whether it be the Spurs, whether it be the Pistons, whether it be the Celtics that he matches up against twice in the finals, like he's facing elite offense or elite defenses, and he's still finding ways to score. He has his off games here and there, but again, he finds other ways to affect it. Wade, again, not easy to stop at all. I'm not saying easy to stop, but less other ways outside of his rim pressure to score than Kobe had because of the limitation in the jump shot. Yeah, I'm really high on Kobe.
Go watch Kobe in 08 against the Spurs. Just go watch it. Masterclass on being one of the best defenses in the league, playing a deep drop. He's obliterating them. And then go watch him 2010, like you said, against the Suns, a bad defense, having to play zone. He obliterates them. Go watch him in 2010 against the Jazz. This is all with like a broken hand, by the way, or finger, or whatever you want to say. And then go watch him in 09 against the Nuggets, obliterating them.
I was like, the most impressive Kobe series to me is 09 Orlando, the finals. That was the number one defense.
His relative true shooting isn't even going to be that high, but another masterful series. So.
And I think in the 09 finals, he attempted like 17 mid-range attempts per 75. Like it was like the most extreme volume because that's the only shot they would give him. But it's like he made him at like a 48% clip, and that's 0.96 points per shot. That is elite half-court offense, and there's nothing you can do to prevent him from getting those shots off. Like the most underrated Kobe trait, or like most like overlooked Kobe trait, and I think this applies to a lot of guys, even in today's game, or maybe it doesn't apply to them, is he was always going to impose himself on a game. There was nothing you could do to like, there's never a game you look at and it's like, man, where was Kobe? It's like, he's just always imposing himself on these playoff games, regardless of how extreme the defensive presence was. Especially like this 3-year run, in my opinion, of 08 to 10 in the playoffs is like where you get just like the classic Kobe performances. And it's just like you guys already touched on the malleability in his scoring to just like flex between, okay, we're going to run the offense through Powell, so I'm going to make an impact off the ball. I'm going to come play on the move. I'm going to be a cutter. I'm going to get on the offensive glass. Or we're going to run the offense through me in a spread pick and roll environment. I'm going to put Tim Duncan in 76 pick and rolls and just kill his drop coverage. Or you want to switch, and now I've got a small on me. Now we're mismatch hunting. Now I'm running my offense through the post, and I'm one of the best post-up guards of all time. And it's just like, yes, he always had something he could turn to. And I also think, like you kind of touched on it briefly, one of the most versatile passers of the basketball during that time, like there was no pass he couldn't make. It's not that he was this highly anticipatory, like dissect you as a playmaker type of passer, but it was like, if you helped off the corner, I could make the corner skip. If you brought help from the dunker spot, I'm laying it down to Pau Gasol. I know how to manipulate the ball to draw extra help before getting rid of the ball. And I just think like he was so versatile in every single facet of his offense while being like what Mars touched on, one of the more valuable turnover suppressors in NBA history. Like that's what you want your two guard to do. You want him to be a scoring weapon who doesn't turn the ball over. And Kobe did that at such a high level in the playoffs that he just became one of the best offensive engines of all time in the playoffs. And then with that, like, I do think that version of Kobe wasn't quite like, I don't think he should have been approaching all defensive teams, but still I think was adding value defensively, like very smart team defender, knew the system. They wanted to run shooters off the line and funnel them into their bigs and rotate out of it. And so like Kobe getting blown by in the perimeter, that was part of the scheme. That it wasn't, he couldn't stay in front of the ball. That's what they wanted to do. And him just being like a communicator for the defense and just making sure everyone's in the right spot at the right time. And then the ability to, in the fourth quarter, notch it up and be like, now I can take on this on ball task defensively, and I'm going to fight through screens and pressure the ball. Kobe Bryant is as close to being the perfect shooting guard as you can be if there wasn't the other guy that was just like basketball god, essentially.
What I said about 03 McGrady. But yeah, I agree. I think it remains true for Kobe as well. Before we get into number one, just because not everyone knows who it is, couple super chats. Context Kid said the errors debate really boiled down to what Kevin Durant said in 24. Who is guarding Steph? Excluding the great Bill Russell, is Steph the most valuable player in history? No.
Offensive, maybe. I think he's the most valuable offensive player in NBA history, but I think there were guys who were close to that level offensively while being defensive player of the year candidates. LeBron James and Michael Jordan. So I think those are the most valuable players in NBA history.
Yeah, I think I think they got to come back for my opinion on that one. Wait till the final list. You'll see on that one. Maybe he'll be number one. Who knows?
You'll definitely be on here for that episode if he's your number one. Shadow57-X7G said, this is not being said enough. I think MJ is a better rebounder than Kobe. Phil needed Jordan in the 97 second round for more rebounds, which led his team in the series versus the Hawks. Rodman in and out of the starting lineup. Kobe never led his team in rebounds in a playoff series, while MJ has twice, 89, which he also led in all 5 stats, and 97, he was 2 assists away. I've never heard anyone compare Kobe and MJ's rebounding, but yes, I think Michael Jordan's a better rebounder than Kobe. But I've never thought anyone would say otherwise. I've just never heard them compared in that way. But yeah, MJ, I value the offensive rebounding. That was another. Michael Jordan was number one, guys. I don't know if you needed me to reveal that. Once again, out of 260 points, Michael Jordan received 260 points.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, everyone had him number one. So everyone involved believes Michael Jordan had the highest peak as a 2-guard in NBA history. What is there to say about Michael Jordan that hasn't already been said without spoiling where he may fall on your all-time top 10 peaks, period? Because I don't want that to be spoiled today. So just what can you say about Michael Jordan, the shooting guard?
I think everything I've talked about positively about every single player we've talked about just applies to Michael Jordan. That's kind of the argument here. It's like, oh, I really value the ability to make plays defensively and generate turnovers. Well, this guy's like the GOAT of generating turnovers. This guy's a guard rim protector who's getting almost 2 blocks a game in the 88 season. I like when guys get on the offensive glass. This guy was getting on the offensive glass while also carrying the biggest offensive load in the league. He averaged 2 turnovers a game in some of these playoff runs while averaging 36 points. So his teams don't turn the ball over ever. Insane interior passer. Like, I've been rewatching the 1991 finals recently. I'm only a few games in, but like the interior passes he's making to dissect this Lakers defense is absurd. In the first half of game 1, he had 6 assists that were layups for the Bulls. And it's like, what are we doing? This is the GOAT scorer. Like, I talked about Kobe's role malleability, his ability to flex between different roles and different pressure points as a scorer and impose himself on games. Michael Jordan was doing that like levels above. He was reaching like the GOAT playoff scorers typically hover like, you start to approach like 32 points per 75, 33 points per 75. Then you pull up the leaderboard and there's like 10 Michael Jordan playoff runs, all like 36 points per 75. And no one is even, and it's all like plus 7% efficiency, plus 6% efficiency. He gets to the line at a higher rate than any guard in NBA history. He's arguably the GOAT mid-range scorer. And then of course, defensively, like just was, I mean, I don't think he should have won a defensive player of the year, but like the fact that he's even in the running for that is absolutely absurd. And that's like the argument for Michael Jordan. It's like everything we talk about, Michael Jordan is essentially just like the maxed out version of it. And it's like, whether you need him to be your dirty work guy, whether you need him taking 40 field goal attempts, whether you need him to turn into a playmaker and average 12 assists in the NBA finals to win a championship. Michael Jordan just had that level of skill, and it was just absolute. It's just absurd. It's absurd. He's one of those guys that like, it feels mythological watching him in the playoffs. It's like this guy's doing whatever he wants. Absurd basketball player.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. There's nothing he couldn't do Probably, I mean, definitely the best scorer of all time. Just yeah, everything you said. I don't know what more there is to say about him. He is the best at so many different categories, and also like adds so much value defensively. I don't know what else there is to say really. He is incredible. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, I think, with the mythological of it all. Like when you go back and watch him play versus watching any of these guys, like I love watching Tracy, like I love watching Kobe when I go back and watch them. They're amazing. But just the stuff that Michael Jordan could do, especially in the playoffs, just was otherworldly. And it's not, I don't think it's something you'll ever really see again.
Yeah. The more I watch him, the better he becomes, which is interesting. And it's nice going back and watching, not because I'm trying to decipher who I think the best player ever is or who the GOAT is, but just because I want to watch. And I said it about going back and watching rookie Michael Jordan. I know that's not relevant to the peak segment, but you just go back and watch, and it looks like he's playing a different sport to everyone else on the court. And even at that point, he probably wasn't the best player in the world because he hadn't figured out the way to leverage his tools, and he wasn't the great jump shooter he became. But even when he wasn't the best player, he still looked like he was playing a different sport. He was, the way he moved, no one else could do what he could do. It was just about leveraging that to impact and winning and all that great stuff. But then once he figures that out in the peak years, which I had down as 88, 89 to 92, 93, just that range of years. It is just someone who forces turnovers, can guard on the ball, gets offensive rebounds, doesn't turn the ball over, can play on and off the ball, dialed all the way in mid-range scorer, relentless rim pressure, gets the free throw line. There's no defenses that know the answer to him. Any defense that does know the answer to him knows the answer for one game, and then they no longer know the answer for him. It's the definition of inevitability. And he was an amazing passer. He could dissect the double teams he was getting. He saw zone defenses. He just did. Were they illegal and did you have to try and hide them? Yes. But he saw zone defenses. He picked zone defenses apart. He picked some of the best defenses we've ever seen apart. Look, the Knicks, he saw some tremendous defenses and he figured them out. He was able to get his volume regardless. It was special stuff while being one of the best defensive players in the league, especially at his position. Now, once again, I don't think he was ever the best defender in the league, but at his position, he was definitely up there. He definitely aids his team in the possession battle while being the most efficient high volume scorer in the league. So he helps your team get more possessions. He's also the most efficient with the highest volume of possessions. Isn't that the aim of basketball? Get more shots than the other team, be more efficient than the other team. There might be no one ever who helps you more in both of those categories than Michael Jordan. It's a ridiculous peak. And the lack of a three-point shot, once again, relative to era, unless you can find the instance where his lack of a three-point shot was bleeding value for him, I don't care. Ultimately, I just don't. He was just that good. Michael Jordan, good player, number one on the shooting guard list, highest peak ever. As a two guard, not ever. We don't know yet. I'm also fairly confident, just because I know the people who are involved in this series. He is going to be the only player who is unanimous at number one on any of these lists. I'm fairly confident in saying that. Now, do I think that is the correct answer? That's neither here nor there. But I am fairly sure he is the only one who will end their episode with a maximum amount of points. So that's it. That's Michael Jordan, the highest peaking two guard of all time. If you stayed around 3 hours and 20 minutes to find that out, shout out to you. Go ahead.
Real quick, I wanted to ask you, where's Jalen Green? I thought for sure you would have put him on this list.
The thing is, right, I know where he deserves to be, but unlike some people who decide that they want to put Joe Dumars at 10 just to give him a shout out with that one measly point, I would never disrespect Jalen Green by having him only have 10 points. It's either he goes number one on everyone's list, or I'm not even going to waste my time having Jalen Green come in 14th place with 10 points. That's just disrespect.
I see. So it's a protest vote. I see. Okay.
Yeah, basically, it's like, if you don't know, you don't know, and you don't deserve to know at that point. So shout out to Jalen Green. Didn't quite make the list.
Can I say
he was only
I'm
260
surprised
points off.
not a single vote for Donovan Mitchell. Not that I would have considered him, but I'm surprised he didn't get 1 10th place vote.
I was expecting Chill to have him, but he went with Joe Dumars. So
the lesser of two evils there.
Yeah, but I thought Donovan Mitchell would get a vote. Was there anyone else who I considered who didn't get any votes? Let me just check. No, not really. Yeah, everyone I considered got a vote or in some capacity.
I will say one guy I didn't truly consider but was on my radar that would shock a lot of people is Eddie Jones. 2000 would be the year, the single season peak. Shout out Eddie Jones, man. Defensive god.
Eddie Jones was he was a really good player. Would have never considered him, but shout out to Drazen Petrovic.
Facts.
Really good player for a low stretch. But anyway, just to recap the list on what happens. If you're joining right at the end, we have 22 total names. In 20th place, it was a 3-way tie between Pete Maravich, Devin Booker, and Joe Dumars. In 18th place, it was a tie between Sam Jones and Mitch Richmond. In 17th place, it was David Thompson. In 15th place, it was a tie between Brandon Roy and Sidney Moncrief. In 14th place, it was Klay Thompson. In 12th place, it was a tie between Anthony Edwards and Vince Carter. In 11th place, it was Reggie Miller. In 10th place, it was Ray Allen. In 9th place, it was Manu Ginobili. In 8th place, it was Clyde Drexler. In 7th place, George Gervin. 6th place, Allen Iverson. 5th place, Tracy McGrady. 4th place, James Harden. 3rd place, Dwayne Wade. 2nd place, Kobe Bryant. And 1st place, Michael Jordan. And with a couple super chats, Dobby Greg again. Shout out to you. You sent quite a few. He said, I get basketball sad MJ didn't stay retired after 98. Basically saying he wished he didn't see Wizards MJ. Wizards MJ wasn't that bad, in my opinion, at least in the first year. But that's the
especially like pre-injury. Yeah, I think
he was a good player. Just he was old and his knees didn't work. Context Kid says Steph's championship teams were elite defenses, so what does it matter if MJ and Bron were better defensively? That's why the debate came down to Steph. That is a ridiculous argument. But... okay.
Draymond effect. Number 1 power forward peak, by the way.
We will be there. 26. I will do 1 year peak for Draymond.
Yes,
Hal Greer did not get a vote. Drink more water. Before we get out of here, Tyler, Arman, where can the people find you at? We'll start with you, Arman. Where can the people find you?
You can find me on YouTube and TikTok at Worst Take Show. I am going to be actually posting on, I don't have the channel set up yet, so I can't plug it, but I am going to be posting game recaps when this regular season comes up as well on a separate channel. But yeah, Worst Take Show, YouTube and TikTok and Instagram, even though we don't really post there. I got to do that more, but
Tyler.
You can find me at Hoop Venue on all platforms and Hoop Venue Podcast on YouTube, Spotify, all that good stuff. Appreciate you having me, man. This was fun.
It was fun.
It wasn't 4 hours.
Yeah,
like 320.
Just under 3.5. Yeah, good work, guys. Good work. We succeeded. Thank you guys for watching. Tap in next week for the small forwards list. I know that one's gonna be divisive. That one should be fun. Thank you guys for watching. Like the video if you want to like the video. If you don't like the video, then don't like it. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Merry Christmas and yeah, goodbye.